Thanks, Ellie. I don't know about you guys, but it's like a wall of information, right? Luckily, these will, they'll be on online, so we'll be able to check them out and actually see it a little bit slower if we want to. So, cool. Now we have time to open up to a Q&A.
Donc, salut.
Cool with that? Yeah. Awesome. We'll take questions from you guys in the audience.
On va essayer de couvrir la conférence CitizenCon de Star Citizen, donc qui est déjà commencée, mais c'est pas la conférence principale, c'est seulement la conférence comme la pré-conférence dans le fond.
What would you say would be one of the most unique challenges for Star Citizen and the work that you need to do?
Unique is probably the scale compared to everything I've worked on previously.
Ils expliquaient un peu les nouveaux trucs qu'ils étaient pour avoir dans la version 3.0 quand on va l'avoir, les nouveaux trucs qu'ils ont rajoutés, les nouveaux bugs qu'ils ont réglés, les shaders, nouveaux shaders qu'ils ont utilisés. Aussi le tone mapping pour changer un peu l'apparence des couleurs dans le jeu pour que les couleurs soient un peu plus vibrantes, comme je disais. Ils ont changé aussi l'ambiance l'occlusion ambiante du jeu pour que ça ait l'air, les images aient l'air encore plus réalistes. Ils ont créé des craquelures soit dans les vitres ou dans les armures en 3D, donc on voit vraiment une craque en 3D aussi.
Make things fast and look good while still supporting all of the great features there when obviously once.
Yeah, I've heard that actually across other disciplines as well, and it's true. I mean, with just the vast scale, there's so many other things we need to keep in mind when we're crafting something as opposed to a small little area or so on. Anyone have any questions from the audience? Whoever has a mic, somebody up front. No, here you go, right behind you. We'll start with the one behind.
Okay, it's not really a question, but I want to say thank you for your hard work you do. That's awesome.
All right, cheers. And that applies to everyone on the team. A lot of work put in by a lot of people.
Ce qu'on a hâte de voir là, c'est vraiment la présentation de Chris Robert.
Wait for the mic. Here it comes.
I just want to know if it's possible, thanks to render to texture, to have an internal bridge of a starship like in Star Trek. So you maybe say for the Polaris, for instance, or a secondary bridge for the Idris. Is it possible with the current tech?
It depends how you define possible. Technically, yes, it's completely possible. You could do it right now. It would work. Frame rate's the issue. If you want two renders that are exactly the same thing, of the same quality, and you want asteroids and fog and all of the post effects we just looked at, then you're going to half your frame rate. So it's very easy to be smart about this stuff and reduce the cost. And for things like holograms, we'll reduce the number of lights. We won't apply certain post effects you don't need. So like a hologram doesn't need anti-aliasing maybe because it's already quite soft and blurry. So there's a lot of scope for doing things. And like say, something like a depth camera or a heat vision, these types of things are much simpler actually, although they might look really cool. They would be much easier, but doing the full rendering pipeline on a full screen would actually be quite intensive on the frame rate. So probably not type of that side, but yeah, it's not a technical question, it's just purely performance and how much we want to be able to let the game scale back to a lower spec system. So that's all we have to keep in mind for that. But it gets asked by design every day, so you're not the only one.
Hey there, I'm from the graphics area myself, and I'm kind of like astonished how much PBR is getting now into game engines. So this is a quite extensive resource drainage, like in terms of how much the cards have to calculate. So do you communicate with AMD and NVIDIA to further develop the PBR-based technology?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the physically based stuff, a lot of it's just, to be honest, there's a lot of research online that we tend to look at for like the latest SIGGRAPH or GDC presentations. There's a lot of information out there on how to do the techniques, but when it comes to the performance, that tends to be where we do have contact with the independent hardware vendors like AMD and NVIDIA, because things like I mentioned that the opaque lighting shader is one giant shader. That is really, really difficult to get to run fast, and that is really difficult to balance across all the different architectures, and that's where you type of need to work really closely with them to make sure that you hit certain like performance cliffs you have. And if you have one instruction over, you drop like 30% performance. So you need to know where these boundaries are and make sure you fit within them, and it's different for every single graphics card. So yeah, there's quite a lot of cooperation there.
A follow-up on that, do you do research and development on yourself, or is that something where you take it from the developers from AMD and NVIDIA?
Like I say, we don't necessarily take it directly from them, and they do papers at GDC and SIGGRAPH like everyone else does. We take it from whoever's got the best. I mean, we do a lot of stuff internally, like say the optics stuff we showed. That was all in-house. One of our graphics programmers just came up with all of that himself. He'd done a lot of research on all this stuff. But other stuff, like say our area light implementation, we took a lot of the research from that's been done by other game studios and other places like that. But yeah, there's no one source. It's wherever the information is, and it's quite open in game development. A lot of people are happy to share, just like we're showing the guts of our game here. It's quite open. So.
Comme c'est à Frankfurt, je sais pas si ça va être Chris Robert, là, c'est le gars du studio de Frankfurt qui est l'animateur, mais je sais pas là.
VR cockpit would be like too much of a strain on the system, but what's the extent of it? Like, for example, we've seen on the RSI Explorer armor, it has like this camera looking thing mounted on the shoulder. So for example, like sending an away team and having like their point of view displayed in the cockpits, would that be like possible at all? So I mean, so you said it's possible, but would it be reasonable?
I'd have to see the actual case to say yes or no. I'm not the designer and I don't know. We have to, sometimes we just run this stuff and just test what the performance is. You never know, and you got like 100 different graphics cards you need to test on. But generally, the advice we've been given to design is we've got a page type of showing what is likely to be possible and what's not. But generally, if it's any type of constraint on the scenario, it means we can probably do it. So if I'm in a certain room and it doesn't have too many windows or any windows, I can probably get a view of somewhere else fine, because that room can be made to budget, to take up a certain number of milliseconds in the frame, and then you're free to do the rest of the frame. But if you're in an open environment with windows and you can see asteroids, planets, and everything, and then you want to look at another view of another planet and another set of asteroids, that's what we can't do. So as long as there's a constraint either on the main scene you're studying or the other scene that you're looking at, then that type of what dictates. So it's a bit of a balance act. So it depends where you are and what you're looking at. I hope that answers.
We had someone up front.
Yes. You said there was a lot of strain on the CPU. I was thinking, is there a CPU you would recommend, one with more threads, 8, 12?
No, not particularly. I can't say one or the other. I mean, multi-core is just the key, though. Like, going wide is the direction we're going, the way that everyone is going. Obviously, the higher-end CPUs, like i7s and i9s, there's plenty of bandwidth there, and we're doing our best to fill that. So, yeah, I mean, the single cores, they can't. You could never compete on a single core. I mean, nobody has single cores now, but there's physical limitations that make it extremely difficult. So, going wide is the way. But in terms of a particular model, not particularly, no.
Parler un petit peu d'optimisation.
We have time for one more quick question.
Most games I played recently using fake mirrors, like Prey, for example. Would it be possible, or maybe that's the wrong question, would it be doable without tanking the frame rate to use real mirrors?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I couldn't quite hear. It's a bit. Can you go closer to the mic?
Most games using fake mirrors today. Would it be possible to use a real mirror image without tanking the frame rate too much?
Again, it goes back to the original answer. Yeah, to the last question. Yes, we can do a mirror. It's not. We actually have to do a little bit of work because a mirror isn't like a camera. It's actually the fact that it flips the image. There's something you have to do inside the rendering. You have to type of invert and reverse all the geometry to get it to flip correctly. But it is technically possible. It is something we'll want to do. But again, it's the constraint question. If you're stood on the bridge of an Idris or something, and then you want a mirror there, next to the captain's seat that's going to reflect the rest of the Idris and outside, then no. If you're in a bathroom somewhere, maybe, yeah, that's completely achievable.
Cool. Well, thank you, Ali, for your time.
Cheers.
Thanks for everybody.
All right, thanks, guys.
Ah, mais oui.
We're going to take a short break, roughly 10 minutes. Next up will be the Joy on history, physiology, and language. Thanks, guys.
No. Prochainement, physiologie, langage. Ça va être pas pire, excellent, ça. Probablement qu'ils vont nous parler des linguistes qui ont créé les langages pour le jeu. Donc, hâte de voir ça. Dans 10 minutes, on va avoir des petits commerciales comme ça en attendant. Puis moi, je vais continuer de dîner pour pouvoir couvrir ça comme il faut tantôt. Il nous repasse un vieux trailer. Imagine.
Good job. Awesome. Good job. These people love the lamp.
Yeah, well, that's all they've been looking at for the stuff last.
It's like what's that thing where someone takes you prison?
What more can be said about the Imagine trailer? The Imagine trailer, originally created by Star Citizen Years 100, impressed us here in the studio so much that we made our own version. It's one of the highlights of Star Citizen's entire development, as far as I'm concerned. These top 10 moments voted on by the backers, the members of Spectrum. Imagine, I thought it would rate higher, coming in at number 8. So I'm kind of excited to see what's next in the top 6. Also, the birth of Lamp. Birth Lamp from our original 24-hour live stream. Folks who were here from the very beginning will remember Lamp. And you saw the quality of our live streams back then. We were on Ustream and stuff like that. So for all you people that got remarks, that got comments about Red 1 and stuff,
Ben oui.
Hey, we're doing our best. All right, so I understand is standing by in the atrium. We've got Ulf. He's here at one of the demo stations. Hey, Ulf, what you got for us?
The atrium, and I'm here at the Tech Gallery, where our developers showcase their skills and tools to create the game that you all love. I'm here with the VFX artist from the Frankfurt studio, Caleb, and he's currently showcasing the particle simulator. Let's try and ask him a question. Caleb, so can you please explain to the audience what you're doing?
Right now I'm just setting up a simple particle effect to demonstrate the various different parameters in the particle editor, how we can combine them together to construct our effects, essentially.
And what kind of particles are those? Like, is this something that is also can be found in the game?
Right now I'm just demoing something. I'm taking input from these guys, so right now the effect I'm making is just something we're making on the scratch, but the process of setting up these particles is the same sort of process that we run through when setting up any sort of effect, whether it be explosions or quantum travel or dust blowing on a planet or whatever it may be.
So in short, you're working together with those guys to actually doing a demo like this. And what kind of demo did you do right now?
Right now we're just making a simple firework particle. So I'm setting up a simple effect that will shoot off sparks, and it will have a smoke trail, and then maybe some sparks like with an explosion up at the top, and it will have a bunch of different colors and some random motion mixed in just to kind of make it feel a little more organic and natural.
That's perfect for New Year's as well, right? All right. Thank you, Caleb. I'm going to let you to it. Thank you very much. All right, back to Jared.
Thank you, Ulf. We are here with Allie Brown, Director of Graphics Programming?
Eva?
Okay. Heck of a presentation, 118 frames. When I saw that at first, I'm like, how is he going to get through that? And not only did you get through it, but you got through it with time for Q&A.
Quickly, yeah. I did my best. Probably spoke too fast.
Nah, you were fine. You were fine. All right, so let's talk just a little bit about yourself. You work out of our Foundry 42 UK studio.
Yep.
What does a director of graphics engineering do?
A lot of my day is taken up by type of, well, it's 50-50, managing the team and helping them out and, you know, diagnosing problems. And because I have an oversight, I can hopefully point them in the right direction to help them find the solution to a problem. But then the rest of it is type of interfacing with the other directors. So we have like a new gameplay mechanic is coming online and like, what can we do? Or is this possible? Like somebody might ask, can we do a mirror? Can we do this? Can we do that? You know, can we blow something up? Can we, you know, cut the ship in half? You know, these types of questions I have to discard the crazy ones and find a way of saying yes to the rest of them.
How many members are on your team?
So we have me and 5 others in the UK, and then we work really closely with our Frankfurt team. So there's 2 or 3 guys there that do a lot of graphics, but it's very tightly coupled, like the CPU optimizations and the planetary work. These are things that have led out of Frankfurt, but the cooperation is really tight between us.
Okay. Now, one of the things mentioned in your presentation, it was at the end, but it caught the attention of folks on Twitch. You mentioned Vulkan. It's no secret that a lot of Star Citizens are a little more technologically adept, a little more technology inclined. When we first mentioned the possibility of working with Vulkan, they're always interested in things that could squeeze that last bit of graphical juice out of the game. What can you tell us, if anything, at this stage? You know, it's still very early going. What can you tell us, if anything, about the work being done or the work that we want to do incorporating Vulkan support?
So it does get a bit technical, this, but the main problem is you need to start splitting up the pipeline so that you can run individual stages of your pipeline with no dependencies on the rest of it. So our code, as like most engine, has been written on the assumption that would only be run on one CPU. And the principle of Vulkan or all the new APIs like DirectX 12 is that they can split the work down into many, many smaller jobs. And by splitting it up, they can then, the next frame, they can just repeat that job, or they can do many jobs at the same time and multi-thread it, which is how you get the performance benefits. So we have we have this giant tangled web, and we have to separate out these individual parts, and then once they're separated, we then can that's where you can plug in Vulkan to get the real performance benefits. But so it's type of detangling the web is the best way of describing it.
Okay.
So that's ongoing. There's quite a lot of work. We do one system at a time. And you know it's getting there, but there's obviously Lumberyard has a huge number of features, and we've added a whole lot as well. So there's a lot to type of get right.
And of course, optimizing or implementing Vulkan doesn't mean we forego DirectX 12 support.
No, the base work for it is actually the base work would improve the performance for everyone. Like doing this work is just helping everyone on any spec. Doesn't matter what you're running. But the groundwork you would do for, say, DX12 or Vulkan is exactly the same. The APIs are different, and there's Mantle as well as the one.
That's right.
One. And these APIs are all type of very, very similar and depend on the same core concepts. So swapping between one and the other isn't a huge deal. It's really nothing to type of moan about. Like the people who develop on consoles tend to have to support multiple anyway. Like they just get used to it. They have to support 9 or 12 or 11 on PC, and then they run something else on the consoles, and each console has something different. So this isn't big, but re-architecting the engine so it can it is type of like componentized, like I said, so it can run on multiple CPUs. That's the real joy of the work and the guts of it. The actual API is type of the icing on the cake, the way to get the final benefits.
All right. One last question before we let you go. Of all the things that you're talking about, all the things that we're got ahead in the future, what's the thing that you're most excited about? What's the thing that you're waiting to dig your teeth into?
It's a difficult question. There's a lot. There's a lot of stuff. I type of like the shader stuff. I worked on the glass there, but I just type of like anything that empowers the artist to really make some cool stuff. I love the physically based stuff because physically based stuff generally it's complicated for us, but then easy for the artist, which is the best possible scenario because then the simpler it is for them, the better they make cool art. And if they're not lumbered down by complexities and weird numbers they don't understand, but if they just get a nice, simple implementation, they can do wonders. But then it makes it more complicated on our side, but then that's why we have a job. So.
All right. So I hear that Ulf is standing by in the atrium with, very special guest. Ulf, who you got?
Hey, this is Ulf, live from the atrium, and I got John Rain with me from JF Fabrications, whose company built this amazing model of the Saber Raven. So John, tell us a bit about the model.
The model was commissioned, obviously, for CitizenCon by Intel to launch their new hard drive. So we started talking about it at Gamescom over in Cologne, and been talking about it to and fro sort of since then. And 30 days ago, we got the go-ahead, and we got to try and build it. So, and bring it all the way over to Germany and bring it here for everyone to enjoy.
Already answers my question. It took you 30 days to build that thing?
We only got 30 days, let's put it that way. from drawing it from the assets, we got given obviously the assets from your designers, and we took that from there and did what we needed to do to get it into the shape it is now. So yeah, 30 long, hard days, about 600 man hours, and a lot of carving, all 3D carved wood, so it's a lot of time.
How many people did work on that model?
3 people. It's been, it's not a huge team, but it's a lot of man hours that get put into it. Obviously, you got all the painting, you got all the milling, you've got all the design time as well, and all the admin time of getting it to here and shipping and all the rest of it. So it's a lot of people, a lot of people hours, but I don't have a big team.
Thanks, John, for the interview. We have to wrap it up. If you want to mention your website, maybe.
Yeah, jrfabrications.co.uk. Hopefully all sorts of Star Citizen stuff available soon.
All right, back to Jared.
Thank you, Ulf. Thank you, John Rain. Well, we've got the 2-minute warning, so we are going to take our seats, ready for our next panel. What is it? The Xi'an language, the Xi'an history, physiology, and language with Dave Haddock, Josh Herman, and Brendan Walken is about to begin. We'll be right back after that happens, so stay tuned, everybody.
Hey everyone, it's me again. This next panel, the Xi'an, numerous ways to pronounce it I've been told, history, physiology, and language. Yeah, it's gonna be pretty cool. The lore of Star Citizen is huge, it's extensive, and it expands well past the human race. This panel will look at how various disciplines actually work together to craft what those alien civilizations are. So let me introduce Dave Haddock, our lead writer out of Los Angeles. Josh Herman, our character art director out of LA. And Brendan Walken, our external xenolinguistics specialist. All yours, guys.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, CitizenCon. So we are here to talk Jean. I'll be basically covering a little bit of the backstory and how they developed as a culture and sort of a character, and mostly actually in collaboration with the various other departments within the company. Let's get started. Basically, when the moment of being tasked with creating a civilization, there was one question that sort of popped into my head immediately, which was that, and abject fear and terror. But once it ended, basically, it was a very simple question of who are they? I mean, that sort of thing seems like a very obvious and silly approach, but it actually can give you a lot of good answers. And so in the early days when Chris and I were sort of talking about the initial framework for what would become the Star Citizen universe, we had the sort of the big four of the alien species. There's the Xi'an, the Banu, the Tavaran, and the Vandal. And so the idea was to basically kind of arrange them in a lineup and, along with humans, and try and figure out sort of like what each of them would bring to sort of the game and sort of the environment, universe, and fiction in general. So these are basically our sort of five main ones. Well, them too. And basically to kind of tackle it, again, it's a big question. Who are they? Who are each of these five? And these are cultures, civilizations. So to sort of approach it, I actually kind of used an analogy that I'd picked up when I was a kid. I read How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, which is an excellent book if you're trying to learn how to draw. But the sort of approach that they taught was you start out with sort of shapes, very, very rough shapes, just to kind of get form and silhouette and stuff. And then you refine it, so you get more detailed as you work your way in. And so that was sort of the kind of approach that we tried with this, because the win with it was that once you kind of establish sort of the basic kind of tone and character, like the specific stuff, you can kind of forget because you're keeping in mind kind of who they are as a culture. So like I could, forget which Zhan house controlled the Second Dynasty, but if I remember who the Zhan are and why they were in that sort of era of their history that they were, I can kind of keep developing stuff for it. So to kind of tackle it, basically with each of these cultures, I sort of tried using terms to kind of identify them. So we'll just kind of run through them real quick. So the Banu, obviously, the traders. They're the ones who are sort of, that sort of very rich trading history and culture and stuff like that. The Tavaran, the Ronin, the sort of warrior race that had sort of fallen from grace, sort of honorable warrior type thing that's sort of in tragic times. The Vandal, of course, are just straight up warriors because they will just murder. And the Xi'an were the diplomats. So, one thing to notice is that you can kind of get a sense of like kind of what each of these cultures represents just on a surface level, and you'll notice that none of this is involving any kind of, physical descriptors or anything. It's not the lizard people or their ghosts or whatever. It's very evocative, and it's supposed to kind of give you a sense of the tone of the character of the culture. And with that approach, it actually was really helpful, because then once we kind of put out this information to the art team and the design and stuff like that, like they could sort of work with it in sort of a more abstract way and sort of and come up with kind of cool things that would contribute to the thing. So for the Xi'an, they're basically, oh yeah, forgot about that. So this was the initial sentence that we used to describe their culture. And with the hope of it being a very singularly evocative kind of sentence that really kind of sums up who they are and what they want. And so that was it. That's what basically we kind of used to give to the teams to kind of start their work and build ships and characters and clothes and planets and all that stuff. And the work that they would do, we would bring back into the lore. So we would help reconstruct the lore to incorporate all that stuff, so there was a reason. So it's a kind of a wonderfully cyclical pattern. So, for example, there's this concept of verticality that you'll see with a lot of the sort of the Xi'an ships, and it was actually, I think, in the original design of the Kartual scout ship where that first kind of popped up, and it became sort of a driving element in the culture, as far as the ships and in the buildings, and as Britton will kind of get into, like even the formation of the language and stuff like that. So basically we come back to this initial question of, who are they? And you guys all know, who they are. But over the past 8 months, actually, it's been a really exciting time, specifically for the Zhan, because working with Josh and working with Britton, as we've been developing like the characters and the language and stuff like that, it's been forcing us to ask a lot of really kind of interesting questions that you don't normally kind of see in a standard gameplay mission type thing. And it's really like exploded, basically, as sort of like a really, really rich culture. And so as part of those conversations, what we did was we actually used a similar thing that we did during the initial push to the GDC announcement of Star Citizen, where we created time capsules. So it was one per day, and each one sort of charted humanity's progression from modern day to the games era, so the 30th century. Like, what are the major historical, cultural, political events that pushed us to be where we are in 2947. So we actually did that again, but with the Jean this time, and created a list that basically, and unfortunately have a lifespan of centuries, so the timeline was a lot longer, like 30,000 years of history longer. So obviously there's, we could try and go over all of it right now if you wanted, but probably shouldn't. So just to give you a sense of like kind of what's come out of that.
Donc, maintenant on a le.
Back in the early days, if you remember, I think it was in the writer's guide, we had actually
on a le panel qui parle
de. The Sean were very cagey about where they came from because of this whole distrust with humans.
De la race
haxienne. Sort of where their homeworld was.
Les langages, un peu comment ils ont fait pour se développer jusqu'à ce niveau technologie-là.
The lineup of all of our sort of big four. Realized that there's nothing really known about the Vandal. The Tavaran homeworld's been assimilated by the UEE, and the Banu don't even remember where they came from. So it was like all of our alien species had no homeworld. So we basically decided, like, all right, let's build up a homeworld, and we'll kind of flesh that out. So the initial idea was that it was a sort of dense kind of like jungle. Very warm type thing. And actually one of the things Will had come up with when he was working on some docs for the Jean was that they actually eat carrion, and they'd like really spicy food, and it's kind of, to us it's kind of disgusting. And so what we did was we actually, like, to justify that, again, we wove it back into like how do we kind of move backwards from it, so why do they eat carrion? And so we came up with this idea that basically they were sort of not on the top of the food chain for a really long time. Like, there were a lot of predators on their homeworld, and so they had to sort of be cautious and eat kind of the scraps that were left behind by other predators because they couldn't get the food themselves. And so it was kind of a wonderful moment because it was, again, another example of kind of how the process kind of can feed itself back into it, because that idea basically reinforces the original notion that we had said in that first description of that they're cautious and patient in their negotiations, because they're very just they've had to evolve as a very defensive species, and so that's the thing that's really fun. Like those moments where, like, we're talking with the art team and we're talking with the design team, and they come up with something that's really cool, and it just infuses the whole process together, and these things really start to reinforce and challenge each other, and lead to really fascinating discussions. We actually just last week, we had a conversation with Jeremiah in LA, because we had the question of how does Jean sleep? Which, from a game perspective, you're never really necessarily going to see, or isn't that kind of important, but it was a fascinating conversation with, once you start factoring in where they came from, what their society's like, do they just lay down, and do they stand, do they sit, like it was really interesting, and it just makes them feel like a really living, breathing species. So again, the don't live there anymore, I'll get into a little bit, but it was basically, we kind of cheated them. We gave them a homeworld, and then we took it away from them. So that was kind of on me. I made that one up. So the second thing, basically, is that we had mentioned in the original Meet the Xi'an thing that we had done years ago, was that there's mandatory service within the culture. And so you guys have heard about the Emperor Krei, who's sort of obviously the leader of the Xi'an. But one of the other aspects that we ended up coming up with was that the Xi'an is basically, houses are very important to them. Your family line is very, very important. It's tracked through the mothers, and basically the houses
Ça marche
can
un
be,
peu comme
also corporations, which is really, really fun, and gives them a really kind of unique spin on what a
Rome
business
ou des
is
trucs comme ça dans le temps.
Business is.
Je pense que c'est ça qu'ils voulaient.
We worked in this idea that this mandatory service that the Xi'an have to perform is actually them joining the emperor's family, basically. So they join the emperor's line, they give up their own name during their period of mandatory service, and with the idea that there was basically this huge war between all the houses that almost destroyed the species and caused the destruction of their homeworld. And so they basically said, all right, we're going to take the military and take it away, and the security and take it away from all these guys, and we're going to consolidate it, and we're going to establish an emperor, and basically take them, Jean, when they're young, and raise them up in this so they get a sense of, they have a sort of affinity for the emperor and the emperor's line and stuff like that, so they're less likely to fight each other. So again, it's just, this is the type of stuff that through the course of these conversations, we're writing up and then we're putting out to the teams and stuff like that. And then we're getting feedback on designs and weapons and ships and stuff like that. And then so we're sort of taking it, reincorporating it back in the lore, and it becomes kind of this kind of wonderful symbiotic process. And it's, basically kind of what we'll do kind of with each of the civilizations moving forward. And I mean, you'll notice again that I didn't mention at all what they looked like, that it's still trying to keep that thing of letting the artists be artists and come up with the stuff and not kind of hemming them in with sort of arbitrary
on avait déjà vu des
we just sort of made up that would be fun. It's like, we wanted to make sure that people could kind of do
des concept art,
fuel their own creativity and find their own hook into it and stuff like that, which is really exciting. But to get into exactly how the Jean look, I will turn over to Mr. Josh Herman.
Thank you. That's a very good segue.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I'll get into some of the visuals of just designing the Jean. Obviously, I came onto the project a little later, after some of the initial stuff has been done. But one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit
quatre races extraterrestres plus les humains, je trouve que c'est quand même correct.
Kind of the concept of a lineup. And so as we have here, you have the Vandul, the Banu, the Tavarn, and the Jean, as well as the humans. The humans are kind of the jack of all trades. They're kind of the neutral. They're like we talked about before this, actually. In D&D, if you play in D&D, the humans are kind of like, they get a like extra plus somewhere else, the extra skill point somewhere. But I think that concept also works with everything else. So like, how will the future aliens fit into this? We don't really know. But I use this example a lot. I found this online. It was actually from a graphic designer. But I don't know if any of you guys can tell what this is from. This is not from our game. This is from another game, a very popular game. Does anybody know what this is from? Boom, Street Fighter. So basically, the concept of a lineup is basically saying that you have all these things that are going to be put together, but you need to be able to distinguish each one of them as an individual. And just by looking at this, I can tell you who Ken is, I can tell you who Blanca is, I can tell you who each one of these characters are. And that's because they're so distinctive in their colors, or at least their reads and silhouettes and proportions, that you can tell who they are. And so we want to be able to do that with our characters, right? This is our lineup of our big four plus one. And so we have, this is kind of the current of where everybody is. So we have our Vandul the warrior, we have our Ronin and the Tavarn, we have our traders in the Banu, we have our humans there, and then we have our Jean, who we're kind of talking about today. Now, just some brief takeaways going off what Dave said. Obviously nothing he said had what the visuals were. Some key things he had was that it's not a predator, or because they eat carrion, which I think is actually a really important thing, which we'll talk about in a second. Speaking with Britain, as he's developing the language, we learned that certain shapes would require certain mouth shapes, so they would need to have im, I believe was the one. Yeah, being able to have that mouth shape, which means they need to have lips, which does clarify some specific design things for you. They're also very good in the technology. They developed the anti-grav technology, and they also have a very long lifespan. So when we kind of start taking that in, carrion, just a quick Wikipedia example of what carrion is and what kind of animals would eat carrion. This is what I would do when I would get this design brief or the high-level brief from Dave. I would Google it, and I would say, what other things eat carrion? Why would they eat carrion? And that's a big example. So as we go down the list here, all of these technically are a predator. A lot of them are predators, but they're not the apex predator, right? They're not at the top of the chain. So what I wanted to bring into the newer designs, and this is all still stuff that we're working on, was a sense that they could have some muscle to them, that they could have some meat to them, but they're not at the top. And so as we start looking at their food, so what kind of foods could they eat? Do they eat just raw meat? Is it just, they eat carrion, so that's old? How does that transition as they become a higher society? Maybe they still like that. Carrion is essentially rotting meat or old meat. So that's very similar to fermented foods. So we talked about that. So fermented food is something maybe that they would be interested in eating. So we look at a lot of different types of fermented foods, a lot of cultures that would eat fermented food like Korean food or things like that. And another thing was the anti-grav stuff. So from the 3D world cover that we did a couple months ago, something that I didn't actually portray well enough is that his collar there is actually floating. So something that we'll be able to do with them that we can't do necessarily with other races is have a lot of anti-grav technology just in their costumes and who they are. Just kind of going through our lineage of where we're at now, right? I came on right after the middle one was done there. And so it's important as we progress that we don't necessarily make like a drastic change, right? We want to keep true with what everything's going. If we need to retcon something, we can do that, but it's not something we want to do at every opportunity. We want to keep it consistent. And I think that's, going back to the Marvel way that you were talking about, how typically you work in the broad shape first, and then you go into the details. And that's something you do for a whole race as well, We're not going to try to nail it on the first shot. We're not going to go and maybe try to make the perfect image the first time. We're going to do a lot of images and see what sticks, and we're going to go back to those, see what were successful, and kind of move on. So these are just some of the high-level things that we start looking at. So just doing silhouettes, starting to see the characters in situation. What situation means is basically what they look like in their home worlds. What do they look like when they're kind of natural? So we start looking at how would an old Xian look? How would a young one look? How would a short one look? How would a tall one look? Do they walk different? Do they need canes? Are they just kind of simple things as to how they start moving? Just very simple keyframes. All this is to kind of capture the mood. To kind of capture the mood, see what strikes us, try to make a compelling image, find what works, build on that, and lose what doesn't work. So again, now we're kind of just exploring the idea of scale, of size, of environment. We can also work in some ideas for costumes, ideas for proportions. There's been talk of whether, obviously we've had some turtle reference, and so do we want to have shells on them? Is that a thing we want? Do we want to try to put that in there? Do we not want to put that in there? Maybe it's just in the costume. Maybe they used to. Maybe it's vestigial. We talk about all these conversations of, how they could have this or how they wouldn't have this. Is this something that we really want to incorporate or not? While we're doing this, we're also looking into interactions between them. Because that can inform your decisions. Even in a simple painting like this, I think this was done by one of the concept artists, Michael. There's kind of a face mask. Is that something that they would wear all the time? Is that their actual face? So we get to explore a lot of these things as we do these rough paintings to explore them. Obviously, this is the Scout. So what do they look like in the Scout? We've never seen one in there. And I think it's important to note as I'm going through these that this isn't necessarily like the final design. This is us exploring ideas. This is us exploring their culture. Just being able to kind of explore more about them. So we've obviously, like you were talking about before, that it's really important, the families. Mm-hmm. So maybe we're exploring the idea of like some sort of a parade or a ceremony or something that the top of the top are having. Family units, so old, young, male, female. Is there a difference between male and female as far as what they look like? Some animals, mammals have differences, some don't. Like a lot of dogs and cats are very similar, maybe just sizes. But then when you look at like big cats, like lions, those are completely different, right? You can have a clear male, you have a separate female. So this is, I think this is one of the explorations for the Council of Three, I believe.
Yeah.
And so you can see in these, even all the faces are different, all the costumes are slightly different. And that's kind of intentional, right? We're not necessarily trying to say like, remember this face I made for the cover, make sure that all the faces look like that face, because that's not the intent of this. So we did this image for a series that Britain is developing, but costumes, they're buying costumes. What would their shops look like? What could their costumes look like? How do they sleep, right? Kind of conversations of that. I think in this conversation we're talking about maybe them being backed up against stuff. Maybe that's part of them still not being at the top of the predator. They need to feel like they're comfortable, that they're protected. The little one on the right, yeah. Exploring how we could maybe bring in some of the elements of their ships. So you see some of the heads on the left, they have some little decorative golden trims on them. How can we make that but not make it feel tribal? You know, if we want to bring in this element to them so they feel high-tech as just a race, because they are very high-tech, but we don't want it to necessarily feel like they're just tribal, because that seems to lower them in the where they would be. Yeah. And now let's talk about some language.
Okay, deal. It's really easy, I promise. I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly, and I'm going to tell you about the t-shirt I'm wearing. I want there to be some time for Q&A, sure. So I'm going to kind of plow through it quickly. And one of the reasons I can do that is because today we are launching a whole set on Spectrum with documents and videos, and if you want to know more about this, you can rush to your Wi-Fi and learn all about it very, very quickly. One of the biggest chunks of this, oops, we had a technical click malfunction.
Try one more time.
Can we go back?
It's okay. There's a big document. The thing is over 130 pages. And there are also videos, and I hope sound is going to play. With Wasanethlea. Otwethling Sia Yao. Ti Poya Yao. Huitung Hoa. Otian Wei with. Word order in sentences. Being, doing, and having. Asking and answering questions. Defining relationships between words and phrases. The basic word order in Xi'an is VSO. So, a whole series of videos starting today. If you're chomping at the bit to learn how to greet a Xi'an or have a drink with one, then go check it out. It's all on the forum on Spectrum. You can find me on the forum as @Xenolinguist. And to give you an example of grammar and what's going on with the language, I want to talk to you about what's on my shirt. So Dave has mentioned that, you know, the Xi'an are the diplomats. You know, they're not necessarily party animals, but that doesn't mean that they aren't party animals either. You don't know what's necessarily going on after the conference is over, or maybe in the last hour of the conference. So on this shirt, we have a piece of Xi'an slang, and I'm going to step you through how it actually works as a language. This is not gobbledygook. This is a real language, folks, and if you want to learn it, it's going to take some time, but it'll give you something to do while you're not shooting down other players. So my shirt says "Echikao Shomama," and it's written on this shirt in some calligraphy. But of course, these are spacefaring people with a 10,000, 20,000 plus year history, so they have all kinds of different ways to write. So you can learn to read in one style or the other. We're going to go kind of simple and straightforward and modern and learn, again, that this is pronounced echikao shou mama. So you might hear my voice jumping around a little bit. There's pitch in the language because a lot of the inspiration was from Asia, the vertical writing and some of the pronunciation and grammar. We start with a verb, which by itself doesn't mean very much, but it tells you it's a verb. And so we're being in at somewhere. But again, real language is rich and complex, so we're going to talk about being specifically here, which is the word kao. So ekao means to be here in a place. And we're going to explain that where we are is in the house. Shou is pronounced, this character, and XYO is the romanization, is pronounced house. So, is here in the house somebody? And chi is a grammatical particle that I don't think you have in German, and we definitely don't have it in English, but it refers to an inflection, some kind of change. So in this case, we're going to translate this as now. It's not really easy to translate into English, but that's what we'll do here. So we have echi kao shou mama. Now, mama is probably not what you think it is. I'll give you a hint. Ma is a root in the language that essentially means animal. So, for example, ma'a is fauna, and maten is edible meat or carrion. Yalma is a sentient animal, some animal that can recognize you and it can recognize it and have a relationship with that animal. Maybe it's just petting it if it's a pet. And this final word, mama, is a slang term that comes from the service dialect of the language, and it means his or her animal. And it's referring to your metaphorical inner animal. So we'll translate it in English as beast. So the shirt is saying essentially, is now here in the house beast. But the smooth translation for that is the beast is in the house. And the grammar is very specifically verb, then subject in the language. And here's the beast. Now, Josh designed the beast. And I don't know exactly why this guy's a beast. Maybe it's because he's a ruthless general, or maybe it's because he really knows how to order cocktails. But
j'aime vraiment le design
des
races extraterrestres.
And I'm sure that he is among us somewhere in the house. And I expect to see him among you later. Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, guys. So the beast is in the house, huh?
You look kind of beastly.
Hey. We're all friends here, man. I kind of walked into that one, didn't I? So now we have time for Q&A. Got a good 15 minutes or so for Q&A, which is awesome. I'm going to start it off. Sorry. But seeing this process that you guys go through, right? That's what's the background, what's the visual, what's the language, and you can kind of see that as a template, right, or a working atmosphere. Do you see this
Je sais pas combien de panels il va y avoir avant la conférence principale.
Is that something then that would be applied, or
c'est sûr que c'est pas ça la conférence principale.
Based off of other variables.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I hope so. It takes time, but it's a fun back and forth because you're getting there's a lot of creative people, so you want to get the best out of them and give them an opportunity to be creative, like I said earlier. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's wonderful to kind of see people feed off of just simple descriptions and come up with like really fascinating, alien things, which is really fun.
Yeah, I would agree. I think for me, I love working in a collaborative environment and also a very iterative environment. So where you're able to talk to each other, work on something, then come back together, have that conversation, iterate on it, and keep going. So I think it is. it's definitely something like that.
Yeah, I can't create a language without knowing about a culture and about physicality. I mean, how many joints are in the arm, you know? Like, you need to know about those things. So we, with the Xi'an, have been having lots of conversations, and we write things and we share them among the writing team, and we refine things, and some ideas drop out, and the rest of it I then have to go make verbs for.
Cool, thanks. Let's open it up for the audience. Where's our guys with mics?
There's one right there, dead center.
Sorry.
I have a question regarding the other languages. Will you also get the translations and those tutorials for the other languages?
I think that is in the plan. I mean, I am working right now feverishly on Xi'an and fleshing it out, and I'll be spending time on the forum with the other people who want to learn it. But you know, Dave or somebody else can also speak to the future if he wants to.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the plan is to do, you know, full languages for the various species. I mean, as far as like who, you know, which ones are more accessible, you know, we're actually kind of keeping in fiction with that. So like, you know, the Vandal, obviously there's no diplomatic relations, so it's, you know, it's not easy for a human being to conceivably learn it. Not to say that it's impossible, but just like, you know, it's probably a lot of guesswork because you're not going to have a Vandal sit there and talk it out with you. He'll just kill you. But so like for the Banu, it feels like, you know, it's definitely a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
He's making his way with the mic.
Hello, hola. Here, over here at the end. Hola. Hello. Okay, just ask. So many games we've seen like different races that are enrolled in like the traders, the workers, like very specific. So when you talk about this, you find a way that is not like everywhere. You always find this Banu that is always traders, or this race that is always like very encapsulated, like they can be also warriors and things like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, again, it's kind of one of the great things that, you know, when talking about this earlier on with Chris, that he had said about the UEEs, that the sort of, he didn't want this sort of evil empire, you know, like very black and white type morality type thing for the humans. And I think it also kind of applies with the races too. It's because, you know, particularly for the Shan, like one of the things we had talked about was the idea that like while the culture is very rigid and formal and stuff like that, there's actually a youth culture that sort of likes the impetuousness of humans. The fact that we are very emotional and we get riled up about stuff and we get angry and stuff like that, that they've actually, you know, in the course of their interactions with us have kind of like that, and so there's this sort of counterculture within the Xi'an where the kids are basically kind of acting out.
Ça, c'est du lore assez poussé quand tu dis que tu fais faire de la contre-culture à une race extraterrestre. Là. OK.
But yeah, I mean, I think but hopefully that's what kind of helps, you know, distinguish each of the cultures.
Donc, ils ont un background, mais finalement, il y a une nouvelle génération d'extraterrestres qui a aimé comment les humains réagissent et un peu leur comportement, essayer d'amener ça un peu dans leur culture à eux autres, former un sous-genre de culture. OK.
Don't line up with that, and again, sort of challenge the expectation.
Tu sais, quand on dit que Star Citizen c'est un projet ambitieux, là, je pense que le mot est petit.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of boring at that point. So I mean, even when it's like the Xi'an, like yeah, they're the diplomats, but they've also had all these historical wars, which means they've also fought, which means technically they're also warriors.
Right.
So you have to like really start, and that means they also have trade and they have all like things to protect. So it's every culture and every race is fleshed out. It's not just the archetype.
Will it be possible that we have a translation of Xi'an Interactive on the Robot Space Industries website? Just a translator, like Google Translator?
You're talking about live
translation of everything that
just
comes up.
using words, and it's going to be automatically translating in Xi'an language?
I won't speak to future technology in the game, but I mean, if everybody wants it to go in that direction, everybody being all of you or all of them and everybody back there, that's possible because it's a grammatical language. You know, it's a full language, and there's still words to be added. You know, sitting here, I realize I need a word for bright, but it could work. I mean, you could have a Google Translate. Whether that will happen or not, I don't know.
Well, not on Google, but on the Rob Space Industries website, on the Spectrum or whatever.
Well, the language, as of a couple of hours from now, you'll be able to go look at the dictionary. It has 900 items in it. It's on the website.
All right.
But whether there's ever going to be any kind of technical live translation of anything going on in the game or online or anything, I think is a question mark. I don't know about that. But you can go start learning Xi'an today. You know, Otoe, go do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
But when you're communicating with an officer of Xi'an, while you are driving or flying your ship, is there a possibility to have a display when Xi'an is talking, and you can read the lines what he's talking about? Is that also the possibility?
It could happen, sure. I mean, there are various typefaces already.
It'll be nice.
One's appropriate for computer.
Parce que si on veut comprendre un peu ce qu'il avait parlé au début, je pensais pour les conversions de langage, c'était qu'on aurait pu acheter des modules qui vont dans notre MobiGlass puis qui font qu'on peut voir en temps réel ce que l'extraterrestre nous dit, là, parce que là, on n'est pas pour apprendre 4 langages extraterrestres pour comprendre ce qui se passe dans le jeu. Là. Faut qu'il y ait quelque chose pour... Ben oui, on pourrait le faire, mais en tout cas, je sais pas. Il me semble que...
Class in comparison to other languages, like I heard you created Xi'an based on Asian languages. How would you classify the language, like the how hard you would think it is to learn, like compared to other languages that we currently have?
Okay. Well, it's not, the grammar is not exactly based on Asian languages. There's some things that are inspired by Asian languages, specifically by Thai and Mandarin, in that the words don't change shape. They don't conjugate. You don't get I want, she wants. That doesn't happen. So from that perspective, the words are very simple. Once you learn the word, and you learn what happens when two words come together in a compound, it's pretty easy to predict what that word is. You don't have to learn any kind of complex morphology. The language is maybe somewhat more difficult to learn than a typical Indo-European language if you're coming from a European background, because it does have pitch that goes up and down. You have to learn to hear the difference between what's a good pitch example? E and E. So those are two different words. E is plant material, and E is some kind of precision. Is some kind of selection. So you do have to learn to hear things differently, but it's not a particularly difficult language to learn, I would claim. The way the pieces and parts of a sentence fit together are quite different from English or German. But you know, unlike German, the verb always comes at the beginning. So there's certain rules like that once you learn them, they're very straightforward.
We have sorry, just really quick. So it's going to be the last question, just because we have to move on to the next one. So, but these guys are going to be here. No, feel free to finish your question, but this will be the last one for this panel.
Thank you. It would be more of a personal question to you, and it would be about the fact of learning your job, like your career parkour, like what kind of jobs is there in if you have a linguistic degree or some sort?
Well, I'm an armchair linguist. I mean, I worked in high tech for many, many years and started doing constructed languages just about 6 years ago. So
ça va être quand même une tâche assez complexe de construire un langage comme ça du début, là.
In tackling working on constructing languages, I would first go explore that world because there's a whole world of people out there who create languages. And some of those people end up doing it professionally. You know, they end up collaborating with a writing team like Dave's or a design team like Josh's. But the first thing is to learn about the world that is out there of people who invent languages. And from that, you will find different avenues into maybe pursuing it as a partial career.
Cool, awesome. One last thing before you guys are done. The beast is in the house. All right, sorry.
Plus 3 beasts.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. The next group up will be the Art of Stanton. We'll be back in roughly 10 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ok, dans 10 minutes, ça va être un autre panel ou ça va être... Ok.
With our Happy Hour Game Dev, we want to try something brand new for you. For the first time in the history of Star Citizen, we are going to attempt to create a character concept image live with the input of you, our Star Citizen backers.
Ooh.
We're approving 5 minutes of OT for our inaugural edition.
So this is a demo. This is like one of the default characters they have, but I like to use this dude as just a scale reference. So if we bring him in here, let's see how big he is right now. He's real big.
Oh, God.
That's
Okay.
Real unfortunate positioning of the import.
Of course,
You're
right?
watching the last broadcast of Disco.
Pupil to pupil, ok, ça veut dire d'un œil à un autre. Mais... On a déjà vu ça plein de fois. Honnêtement, là, je me demande tellement qu'est-ce qu'ils vont nous montrer à la vraie conférence parce que là, ça fait presque 1 an et demi tout ce qu'on voit, c'est du 3.0, des améliorations du 3.0, des trucs qui étaient dedans qui sont plus dedans, des nouveaux trucs qui vont être dedans qui étaient pas dedans au début. Mais là, je pense qu'on serait dû pour un petit peu de nouveau là. Donc, j'espère qu'on va voir des trucs qui vont nous faire décrocher la mâchoire pendant la conférence. C'est bien de voir ça, là, qu'il n'y a pas de tension, mais on le sait déjà, qu'il n'y a pas de loading. Star Citizen. The first-person universe.
Welcome back, everybody, to CitizenCon 2947, Exploring New Worlds. I'm Community Content Manager Jared Huckabee. You just saw number 6 and number 5 of our top 10 favorite moments from Star Citizen's broadcast history as voted on by the members of Spectrum. Number 5 was, of course, the amazing Pupil to Planet video. Absolutely one of the highlights of the time that I've been here with Cloud Imperium Games. And number 6 was not. It was not. All right, so standing by right now, we've got Ulf Kirchner, our community manager at Foundry 42. He is upstairs in the UEE Diplomatic Corps bar.
Oh, petit buzz électrique dans leur audio, ça vient pas de moi.
And I got a guest from Minsk, Peter. All right, Peter, why don't you tell me about your experience at CitizenCon? What do you think of it so far?
This is a really great event. I have seen many people. I have seen many new technologies coming. Many new technologies integrated in the project. It's really appreciated by the whole community. I think it's all appreciated by all people who came tonight to enjoy the party, to enjoy the way, to see all the faces who we appreciate, who we like to see everywhere written in news. So this is a cool, really good event. I really appreciate it.
And you told me about the Russian community. It's a big community, and we appreciate everything you do, by the way. What can you tell people who don't know about this community?
Well, the Russian community actually very big, and what is happening right now? Right now, we organized the first ever Bar Citizen event in Moscow. So around 100 participants came from all part of Russian-speaking countries, not only Russia, but from Belarus, from Ukraine, from Baltic countries, and they are all appreciating. They are all sitting right now in the rented facility in the center of Moscow, decorated, of course, especially, and they are watching the live stream, and I'm really hope that. I really hope that they are watching us, because this is really important for the Russian-speaking community to know that they are really appreciated by the developers, they are really appreciated by community managers. So just go ahead and say hello to Moscow.
Hello, Moscow. We appreciate, as I said, everything you do. And come on, let's throw it to Jared together, like this. Come on. Okay. Off to Jared.
After Jared.
All right, thanks, Ulf. Up in the UEE Diplomatics Corps bar, that's just one of the many areas we have here inside the Capitol Theater. Many of our developers, after they finish on the stage, after they finish up with me, they head straight up to the bar to meet and mingle with many of the backers here in the Capitol Theater. Joining us now after, I gotta say, a very successful Xi'an language and physiology panel, lead writer for Star Citizen Squadron 42, Mr. Dave Haddock.
Hello.
And Britton Watkins, linguist for both Star Citizen and Squadron 42. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Jared.
Thank you. Now, that was a heck of a panel. It was one of those things. We published our schedule a couple weeks ago, and there were a couple like head scratching, head scratch like, really, they're going to do a whole hour and whatnot. But the ATV that we did at the beginning of this year on the Xi'an language was one of our most watched episodes of ATV. So the chance to come back for a follow-up, 10 months later, really great. And before we get into anything, I don't have that shirt. I have almost every shirt.
You weren't standing in the right place in the audience.
I didn't even know that shirt was an option. Like, I got my staff shirt and I got my volunteer shirt and everything. I did not know that was an option. So what's the deal with that shirt?
Well, I think it might, in terms of people getting it, it might be a work in progress. But yeah, we just wanted to have something that would be a way to show another dimension of the Xi'an, and it's visual and linguistic, and it works to keep you from being naked. So, it's very handy, these shirts.
Hold on. Let me see how well I was paying attention. Ichikao yo mama.
Very close.
Okay, forgive my pronunciation.
Ichikao sho mama.
Ichikao sho mama.
Yeah, sho. Okay. XYO, sho. Okay. House or dwelling or place where you feel safe.
Yes. The worst part of the old ATVs was when I had to pronounce people's names. I'm terrible at pronunciation. So the fact that I got that far, I'm considering a personal victory.
I knew what you were asking. You get a big thumbs up for that.
All right. Now, we have many alien races in Star Citizen. Well, maybe not many, but we've announced several. We've got the Vandal, we've got the Banu, we've got the Tavaran, the Kurthak. I really like the very bottom Kurthak. What makes the Xi'an the right race of all these races for us to spend this much time, for us to spend this much energy developing and building out in the universe?
Well, part of it was, as I sort of mentioned on the panel, it was with the Vandal, there was sort of there's a step removed from them because they're not really like friendly at all. So it's like
spoiler alert.
Yeah. So it was just that thing of like, and also with what Britain announced too, it's about going on the spectrum and sort of releasing these language docs and sort of working with people to develop it, was like, we wanted to keep that level of detachment from the Vandal. The Xi'an felt like a species that has a lot of interactions with humans. In the lore, we've talked recently about like these trade initiatives. There's like they're syncing up sort of commercially and politically and stuff like that. So there's a lot of Xi'an around, basically.
And of course, if you pay any attention to the star map, there's a nice hefty Xi'an section of space there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely.
So this kind of work will get its use in the game.
Yeah, and we have a bunch of as we're doing like with the Nox and the Car2Wall and the POA, and all these Xi'an companies are starting, and even MISC too, with their sort of Lend-Lease thing with the Xi'an. Like they're present. There's a lot of them around. So they needed that kind of depth to the language and stuff like that as well to kind of make them feel grounded. And again, it was something that it felt like we could engage with the community on.
Gotcha. All right, so my next question is about the Xi'an language docs, but we are going to throw it to Ulf real quick. He's back in the UAE Diplomatic Corps bar. Ulf, who you got for us?
Hey, this is Ulf from the bar, and I have a new guest here. Please introduce yourself to the audience if they don't know you, but I think they do.
Hi, my name is Meyer, or Meyer_test. I am a Twitch partner, stream Star Citizen, and voice actor.
All right, so you flew in from TwitchCon extra for CitizenCon now, I guess?
Yeah. So I'm here, finally.
So I heard that you were part of the whole head scanning project that we did today. Right. Tell us a bit about the experience. Did you have to shave?
I did. So I didn't do a charity stream about it or anything, but yeah. So I had 2 years worth of growth on my face, and I shaved that all off for today. But it was a great experience. But it was really cool. Really blinding, making silly faces. They actually let me scan my hat, just at the very end, for fun. Right. And then they just rendered it, so I saw it maybe 10 minutes ago, and it looks really good. It looks really good, yeah.
So your hat's gonna be in the game as well? What?
I don't think my hat's gonna be in the game, but he was like, "Yeah, I want to show you this thing," and I just so I could see it, and it was really cool.
So the guys doing the head scanning, they actually saw you without your cap.
They did, yeah. And I streamed it as well, so my stream has seen me without this now, so I guess now the world has too, so there you have it.
All right, so how do you enjoy CitizenCon so far?
It's been amazing. I've been to two ones before, but this time around it's been an actual convention, and it's really, really awesome what they've done with Intel, the giant saber outside, the presentations going on right now, and all this happening in between. It's amazing. I'm having so much fun.
Thanks, Meyer, for the interview then. We're going to throw it back to Jared. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ulf. Thank you, Meyer. The hat game at CitizenCon this year is very strong, as evidenced by one of your Q&A members. Twitch chat was quite enraptured with the hat game, and I got to tell you, folks, some of the reactions I saw, don't be jealous that you don't have hat game that strong. that guy had some strong hat game. Now. Britain, one of the coolest things, and a surprise to most, the Xi'an language documents that are going online. I believe they're on the website right now. I've been here, so I haven't been able to follow the publishing.
They should go up as soon as you kick us out of these chairs.
Gotcha.
The document itself may be released with the next video, but as of today, we'll have the initial introduction to the language video. You'll be able to start learning how to pronounce things correctly in that, and there's more detail coming on that in video number 2. There's the full dictionary, so the real language nerds out there can go through and start pulling words apart and figuring out, you know, the way the pitch is written in the Roman alphabet. And if you want to dive in, there's tons of stuff to do as of right now.
I remember when I was a kid buying the original Klingon dictionary by Mark Ockrent. Yeah, it was Mark Ockrent,
1985,
right?
yes.
It's what possesses you. Speak for him, speak for you. What possesses somebody to go into that kind of field, to sit there and say, I want to create a language? That's my contribution. It's an amazing contribution. Don't get me wrong. I have no relation. I can't relate.
Well, it's not really a field yet, I would say. You know, there are a handful of people, getting to be two handfuls of people who've done professional language creation for entertainment franchises, or you know, for game franchises. But it's a new thing, but creating languages is a thing. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people out there who do it. And entertainment now is realizing, oh, this is a way to make things deeper, to make things more interesting, to give people something to remain engaged with when they're not online, when they're not actively playing or watching. So it's not really a field yet, but creating languages has been a thing for over 1,000 years. And it's just now kind of hitting its stride with online communities, with the internet in general, with the kind of internationalization of entertainment. So I'm, you know, looking forward to more and more people having the opportunity to be able to do this. And the wonderful thing about Star Citizen is that there is a mindset with this experience, with this game, with this community, to embrace everybody who wants to learn the language. So we're already, as of today, asking people, what words do you need that you haven't found in the dictionary? You know, those requests and those suggestions are going to come from everybody out there, you know. Some of it I will continue to do. There will be new ideas that emerge in the writers group and the development group, and I'll be adding things directly to the dictionary. But if you want to engage, come on over and send a message to @XenoLinguist or just post something and I will respond.
And of course, you're talking about posting in our brand new Xi'an language subforum that we've created up on Spectrum.
Yes, on Spectrum as of soon. Minutes.
I'm hoping I'm not supposed to push a button somewhere. I think Sherry's on it.
I think Sherry's on it.
I hope Sherry, if I'm the one that's supposed to be doing that, I'm busy.
Thank
you, Sherry. Thank you, Sherry, so much. What's next for the Xi'an? Is there something next for the Xi'an, or do we move on to the Banu? What's next?
Well,
that you can share.
There's fleshing it out. I mean, there are about 1,000 words in the dictionary. We probably need about 2,000 for us to be able to talk about anything that we would like to at the bar coming up. So, you know, there's still some growth work to do with the lexicon. But I think what's next is for it to become a living language. You know, people have to learn it for it to be a living language. And once it's a living language, then that helps everybody else understand how to prioritize putting it in the game and what kinds of experiences people will have. You know, you're not going to need to speak Xi'an fluently in order to survive a battle, probably, but you might have a much more interesting experience the first time you touch down on a Xi'an planet if you can read everything in the streets that you end up walking down.
Ichi Kao Show Mama.
Don't step
No,
here.
no. No, I'm trying. All right, we've got Ulf standing by in the UE Diplomatic Score Bar. Ulf, who you got for us?
New guest who obviously didn't participate in the head scanning because he got your beard on. What's your name and where you're from?
I'm Darinator and I'm from Slovenia.
All right. How was the drive from Slovenia here? I mean, it's quite a bit.
Oh, it was quite lengthy. Yes, about 9 hours and quite cold as I had to go over the Austrian Alps. So yeah.
But was it worth it? Do you enjoy CitizenCon so far?
Oh, definitely. This is my third CitizenCon I've been to. I've been to Manchester one and the LA one, and this is by far the best one that's ever been done. Yes, it's amazing how much progress they've made in all the organization and the events and everything that's been happening.
Yeah. So what was your favorite panel or show what you had so far?
Well, so far, probably the original address by Chris Roberts, just because I realized I was one of the lucky ones who got the golden ticket. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm really looking forward to the final one. And I've just been fascinated by the graphics presentation about how the entire game is being rendered, and it's just I've always been very fascinated about what things happens in the background, and not just the way it looks pretty, but just how it looks pretty. Yeah.
Ben, c'est sûr.
Out of all the time you're playing Star Citizen, what was your most memorable moment?
Je pense que c'est un des trucs qui veulent vraiment focuser dessus. Les graphismes, on s'en rend compte depuis le début.
If it's NEA, you don't say it.
Moi, je me souviens, même dans le module, là, encore, on s'entend que maintenant, ça a changé vraiment
tell me a bit about the cardboard
même
person
les
right
modèles de
behind us?
vaisseau ont changé.
Just a quick shout-out.
That
même
is
dans
Montoya, glorious leader of
le module de
Test
hangar, on a
Squadron,
regardé ça la première fois.
Unfortunately, couldn't come with us, but he is with us in spirit.
Greetings.
Beau,
so before I head off to Jared, I'm going to go down to the lobby, get some refreshments. Everyone should do the same. So thank you very much for the interview. And this was all. Back to you, Jared.
All I really want to know is how does Squadron 42 end? Just tell me. Just tell me now.
I think we can talk now, Jared.
Just tell me now. All right, guys, we got the 2-minute warning, so we're going to wrap things up. We're about to begin our next panel, the Art and Tech of Stanton, with Ian Leland, Pascal Mueller, and Michael Cooper. So stay tuned. That's starting in just a minute for Dave and Britton. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you in a bit, guys.
Quand on va avoir ça entre les mains, là, sérieusement, ça va être excellent. Déjà, la 3.0, j'ai tellement hâte, là, étant test avec les Evocati. Là, ils vont être en PU, dans le fond, probablement d'ici 2-3 semaines. On l'espère. Puis ensuite, peut-être 2-3 semaines plus tard. Probablement avant la fin de l'année, là, on devrait l'avoir grand public, là, la 3.0. Ça serait excellent. Avec une petite patch 3.1 direct en revenant des fêtes. Là. Ça serait le fun, ça. Non, faut pas trop les en demander quand même. Dans le fond, probablement, j'ai l'impression qu'il va y avoir vraiment beaucoup de panels comme ça. Peut-être encore quelques-uns avant la présentation principale. Donc, moi, je fais vraiment la couverture là, tout au long du CitizenCon. Parce que cette année, ils ont dit c'est ça justement qu'ils feraient ça justement en présentation comme ça. Je suis pas arrivé au début, mais... je savais que j'avais pas manqué la présentation principale. Là. Je savais qu'il faisait quelque chose d'un peu spécial. Mais ça peut-être que c'est des trucs qui l'intéressent moins. Mais c'est quand même, si vous êtes vraiment intéressé à Star Citizen, tout ce qui se dit pendant ces petits panels-là avec les différents studios, les différentes équipes qui travaillent sur différents trucs dans le projet. Ah, nouveau panel.
Me again. You guys
Eddie
again.
Chamber.
Welcome to the Art of Stanton panel. They're going to show off some cool stuff and talk through some of the technical things that they've done to get there. Universe, obviously, in Star Citizen is absolutely huge. It's got a vast amount of diverse, with quotations over that, star systems. Each planet and system is absolutely crafted with a purpose and with some history and with intent.
Ça, c'est ça qui est bien.
This presentation will take you through some of the process and some of the challenges,
No Man's Sky,
as well as a
avec
demonstration of the tools
une galaxie au complet, des milliards d'étoiles.
So,
c'est le fun.
please let me welcome Pascal Mueller, Senior Environment Artist from the German office.
Quand tout a vraiment une histoire, tout ça. C'est vrai que ça donne quelque chose de beaucoup
we have Ian Leyland, our Environment Art Director based out of UK.
Gameplay. Parce que de l'autre
And
côté,
we have
oui, t'as
Michelle
beaucoup
Cooper,
exploré,
lead
c'est toujours
environment
pareil.
artist out of the
Là,
German
c'est
office.
différent et avec une implication dans l'univers directement, dans l'histoire.
Hello. All right. Hello. How are we all doing? All okay? Okay. Good. Did we want to share the right screen? All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about art. Out of curiosity, who's been to like the UK or the German studio and done like a backer visit and heard us talk about some art before? Anyone? Yeah. All right. So you might have heard a bit of this before, but hopefully there'll be some new stuff in there. Okay. So let's talk about art from the heart. All right. Okay. So we've been working on the Stanton system for a little bit. And what I want to do is we'll actually go through, that's me, that's Michelle, and that's Pascal. Check that owl out. It's a sweet owl. Okay, so I want this panel just to focus on the landscapes. So, you know, within a system, you're going to have quite a variety of locations, you know, space stations, satellites, that sort of thing. But this panel, I just wanted to focus on the landscapes, because that's more than enough for like 40 minutes. We tend to get quite passionate about talking about art.
Désolé pour ces bruits-là.
Keep some momentum.
Le temps que ça arrête,
and then secondly, we're going to talk about the visual palette. So what I mean about that is, you know, within one system, we want to create a canvas. And within that canvas, we want variety of contrast and all sorts of things. Then we'll move on to the sort of things we've been doing lately. So building out moons from start to finish. And maybe just try and convince you guys that it's not quite easy just yet. And then we'll move on to our pipeline on tools, you know, how we're achieving these moons. And then we'll give you a quick demonstration just to give you a little insight.
We'll be doing it live.
We'll do it live. I was going to say something, but I'm going to keep this clean. So yeah, we'll show you the tools, because I think that's quite important, because one of the things about the engine, which is super cool, is you get to do it live, and you get to do it real time. So we'll show you a little bit of that.
Mais là, ce qui est intéressant, on va voir comment il crée une planète ou plutôt une lune de A à Z. J'ai vraiment hâte de voir ça. On va voir ça live. Il nous en avait déjà montré des bons extraits dans certains Around the Verse.
So, system visual palette. So, I'm sure you've seen a lot of these before, but I think it's very important to use as a starting point. So, within an entire system, you're going to have a variety of palette. So, what I mean about that is, say, for example, when I'm on Hurston, I'm thinking, oh yeah, I remember what it was like on ArcCorp. That felt like that. And when I'm on ArcCorp, I'm thinking about Hurston. When I'm on Crusader, I'm thinking about Microtech. So that's what we want to create, like a distance. So when you're on a planet or a moon, it's when you think about another planet that's very far away, it's bringing that space opera to the game. It's not like you can just go from Hurston to Crusader to ArcCorp within a couple of minutes, because we want to stretch these guys out.
Ah, sérieux?
Hurston, so you've heard about this guy before. We wanted to create something that was very appropriate for Hurston Dynamics to be in, super polluted. The main landing zone is Lawville. It's pretty much a city covered in ash. There's going to be things like these cultivated gardens, so across the landscape the Hurston executives can go to. We're exploring like how the biomes around the planet, if it was like heavily polluted, if a corporation showed serious neglect, how would that influence the flora and fauna? Because that's when things start to get quite exciting. Okay, Crusader, big gas giant. This is personally going to be my favorite within the Stanton system. I can't wait to get to this. So it's a big floating lattice of platforms. You've got the shipyards and you've got like this landing zone. But what's going to be really interesting is the fact that the vista is going to be pretty much 90% of what we're going to do there. There's going to be a huge potential for things like weather systems and atmospherics, and then things like dynamic weather. So the way I always describe it is like, imagine I'm Bob there in the lower part of the frame, and he's looking out, and that weather cloud comes in. So say, for example, you visit there, beautiful sunshine, and maybe next time you visit, you're inside this thick cloud. I start getting the graphics engineers pretty freaked out when I talk about being inside clouds. It's fine. You got it covered. Okay, ArcCorp, the usual totally urbanized planet. But one of the things right now is imagine a day-night cycle on this guy. So we've all seen day-night cycles in games, and it's like, oh, okay, that's sweet.
Ouais.
Imagine that on
ouais, c'est vrai. Le cycle jour-nuit, c'est vrai, parce que là, on n'a pas ça dans Arcade, parce que là, pour l'instant, c'est juste un module à part. Mais là,
so
ça va être complètement
nul. Terraform and Accident. Unusually thick layer of clouds. Again, freaking out the graphics, guys. Lots of possibilities to do with extreme weather.
Le concept art, leurs concept art sont toujours excellents.
All right, so we've been slowly working on this corner of the Stanton system.
Juste vous dire, il y a peut-être un 4 minutes de délai quand vous écoutez avec la conférence originale. Je l'ai gardé comme la meilleure qualité d'image de la transfusion parce que on s'entend, les graphismes,
this has been really great for both the team to see and hopefully you guys as well. So I don't know if you remember, like the first time we showed Selin, I think it was like about a year or two ago, and he was just like a textured sphere in the sky dome. That was great. So if we're going to zoom in on there, this will show you a little bit about what the guys have been working hard on over the last couple of months. So 3 Moons of Crusader. Maybe we just do something like this and say done. Yeah, all good. Actually, that isn't really what we wanted to do, because I think even within a small corner within the system, we wanted to create variety and depth. And also because this is going to be our first showing of things like our procedural planetary tech and things like that, I wanted something that helped push the tech forward, right? Because if we did something like similar to our own moon, the tech would be good to deliver something like that. Whereas if we start exploring, hey, maybe we do this or maybe we do that, then hopefully it's kind of preloading what the tech needs to do a bit further down the line. Okay, so where do we start? I can't go to these guys and say, I want a blue one, I want a red one, it's going to have rainbows. So we always start with lore. So what this means is it's always like the best starting point for visual design. It ensures that our ideas sit within like a system tapestry, kind of what we said before, because if we're working in a corner, I'm like, yeah, we're going to have some blues and reds and whatever, then we'll get to like the rest of the system and we'll just have like Skittles, you know, taste the rainbow.
Yeah. So you want to sort of balance that stuff out.
Sure, you want to balance it out. So, you know, starting with lore helps us with that initial starting point. It also means it's a little bit deeper, a little bit less superficial, because if I go to Pascal and I'm like, so we're going to have like blue mountains and we're going to have red rivers, it'd be like, okay, sweet, I'm on it. Right. Yeah, there will be a planet with that. Okay, and it also, it's an example of the sort of information of the location. So with lore, we get, okay, this location, it has this, it's maybe this type of geology, it's had this sort of history. And then instantly I'm like, okay, yep, I'm with it. And then the brain starts racing. I don't know if you remember this GIF for Baba. I'm sure Dave's talked about this a few times, but who of you has actually seen like the 3 orbital rings of Crusader's moons in Olisar? Anyone? No? Okay, maybe that one got missed. All right. So a GIF for Baba. Okay, here we go. We're going to move it along. All right, okay. So when we're thinking about, okay, we're going to do these 3 moons, where do we start? And then we think about what we call biomes,
Probablement
right? And then
screenshot.
When we start thinking about the biomes, it's all about the details. So first thing we do, we create mood boards. This is we've got the lore, we've got the location. This is pretty much our briefing. From there, we start doing, you know, we collecting images. These are quite small for copyright reasons. But we're just looking around, finding a palette that works. So instantly you can kind of see the 3 moons here, and you're starting to see the tapestry sit together. This is the most cost-effective and time-effective way of exploring ideas, because essentially, I'm not going to the guys and saying, hey man, let's do an ice planet, let's do this. You know, so we can go very, very quickly. And then this is pretty much the pitch we use toward the disciplines. So if I go to the design director and saying, okay, this moon's made out of candy floss, you know, it's kind of soft, he'd be like, maybe not just yet. Okay. Candy floss moon.
Stick it in my eye.
It's just on your face though. All right, okay, so we've been up to this point, we've got the lore, we've got the location, case set, we've got the briefing, so we've got our corner, then we can start being creative, right? So this is a very, very fun part of the process where we can just, get our ideas going. So until this point, we're kind of defining the box we're going to work in. We use a lot of, we can use anything, right?
Je fais juste regarder ces screenshots-là, c'est le genre de visuel qu'on va avoir, c'est
and it's also kind of the part where, I mean, when we did the Homestead demo last year, we were using the same tech, basically. But we got quite confident in getting something really nice looking, but then you get your concept art and very, very specific visuals, and you try to hit that target, and you realize, okay, actually we never tried this before, and it's not actually working as we planned. So then also the R&D comes in again, so it delays the process a little bit, but improves the tech, so just so we can hit these concepts, or be sure that we can actually go through during development, hitting these targets.
Mm. And what we do as well, as we're developing these ideas, it's a very intense period of time when all these ideas are coming through, and we're getting them on the wall, and we put them on our own internal sharing system, so all developers can kind of see it, so everyone's checking it, going, all right, yeah, Candy Floss Moon, that's going to be sweet. All right, okay. So once we've gone through the ideas and it's kind of getting some validation from the different discipline directors, and then we're like, let's start honing in. So, this is
Désolé pour ce son-là, je vais couper l'audio de mon micro.
In atmosphere, we wanted a very extreme contrast to it, quite stark. Again, Law said it's got over 100 dormant volcanoes, and it's got all these active geysers that, in fact, trigger the conversation. Is it geysers or geysers?
Yeah. A geyser?
Yeah. It's a geyser.
We still haven't figured that one
so
out.
There's all these geysers on Selin, right?
Maybe there's a geology expert who can actually
if you
help us out on that.
Come see me later. All right, okay. And already, these ideas start giving the different disciplines ideas, because, when we saw these geezers, people start saying, okay, well, that influence a player. If I stand on a geyser, I'm going to say it different every time. If I stand on one of these guys and it goes off, what's that going to do to me, right? Okay, and then we go to yellow. The law described that as this thermal frost on it. It's very, very, very cold. So I was like, all right, okay, ice. And then I went to the director of graphics, Ali, and I was like, we need an ice shader. And he was like, no, we can't do an ice shader yet. So, okay, reel it back in. We can't do ice yet, but we will do ice soon. So again, this part, it's about, it's not us just going away and just, we're going to do this. It's a collaboration process, right? So instantly, that's how it works. So thermal activity, good. We wanted, as a backup, I wanted a variety of gloss. So instead of a moon that's generally quite matte, I wanted something from space. You just see where it's matte, and you get these nice, beautiful kind of reflections from a low orbit. So you'll see that as well. And then we're thinking about how maybe if it's when you see in the Arctic, you see these thermal winds whipping across the landscape. Imagine if those guys are coming across. So all of these ideas are coming through, and it's bouncing between art and design and graphics and back. So it's a very creative process. And again, I was maybe northern lights, and then just got some.
Ça donne des visuels tellement
from Ali again. Sorry, Ali. All right, and then we got Daymar. So it was described as the biggest of the three. So we wanted to do something that's quite thick in terms of atmosphere. Remember what I said before about helping to push that technology forward? So the clever guys in the studio developed this beautiful physically based tool for describing atmosphere. So instantly as an artist, I was like, yeah, ramp that up, make it foggy, that's all good. And again, I got a phone call, and okay, we ring it back in. So we made it quite thick, because I'm sure when you've seen videos, if you've been upstairs playing it, the way it interferes with the light, it's really quite beautiful. So seeing how that tech works and it's helped us calibrate it and understand it. So when we get a tool that's physically based, and we get me and Rally scatterings, we're just my physics isn't so good right now, so I'm playing with value. So it helps us to calibrate the system. And then just on a slightly subliminal, up until now on Yala and Selin, all the forms have been coming up. So for this, for Daymar, I wanted all the forms to go down. So that's why you've been seeing things like trenches and ravines. So on a very subliminal sense, we're changing forms. Again, we're exaggerating variety, even within a corner of a system.
Cool. Okay. So, let me just take this on. So, whenever we kick off this process where we get the VTs and start breaking down, okay, how do we actually start building this stuff? There's 4 major levels of detail that we have to look at. So the first thing would be the global look of the planet. So how does it read from a distance? Can you, for example, on Yela, we wanted to have this clear distinction between like frosted areas, icy areas, and it has to be visible from a distance. The second part would be what's the actual shape of the terrain. So Yela and Selen have shapes that go outward, whereas Daymar goes down. So all these different features, we try to capture them in the terrain shapes, and these translate to our ecosystems. Then when we go one step further, we have our scattered objects, all the objects and like the rocks, the trees that you would find on the surface. And what we try to do is to complement the terrain shapes with these extra scattered elements. There's only a certain amount of details that we can get out of the terrain, like the terrain texture and the geometry that we have for the terrain. So anything that's not sharp enough or not crisp enough or not adding enough detail, we add with the scattered assets. And then finally, when you get really close to the surface, we wanted to make sure that this difference between these locations also translate in the type of materials that you would see. So building an ecosystem, this is something that wasn't there on Planet V1, and maybe Pascal can elaborate.
Yeah, from V1, I don't know if we actually saw a lot of it. We saw it in one demo, I think. But it was very limiting in terms of variety you can create on a planet. So because everything was it was very procedural. You had very few artistic input from what was going on your planet. And the ecosystem, or the V2 technology, actually allowed us to have multiple biomes right next to each other. And basically how it works is we have basically a big ball in space. And there's a whole lot of little checkerboards, like you see on the top right.
You can't see that yet.
You can't see that. Oh, fuck.
Should I just go to the next one?
There we go.
Boom.
That's what I'm talking about. So this is basically what an ecosystem is composed of. I mean, that's a fraction of it, but you have a height map that kind of defines the terrain, how it is displaced. You have a normal map that improves the shading from a distance. And you have this weird colory map, which is what we call a splat map. It's kind of a technical map, and we use it for where different textures are assigned. So we don't want to have mountains with just rocks on it everywhere. We want to be able to say, okay, here we have sand, here we have rock, and here we have grass. And this is what this map allows us to do. So this is kind of how one ecosystem is set up.
And the cool thing is, like these same textures, they're tiling, so we can seamlessly cover the entire surface. But we have different variations, so the way we break up the surface, we have a variety of these, and we just paint them down, and they will blend with each other. We can offset the scale, so they don't always look the same, and that way we can cover the surface quite fast. But the cool thing is these maps also feed into our scattering system, which we will talk about in a little bit, where like the splat map colors will determine, like, oh, we put the rocks here, we're going to put sand here, or we're going to have grass. But the height and the direction of the normals also helps us give an extra layer of control over where we place our assets. So just to give an example of the common looks of the planets, like translated into ecosystems, Selen, which is built up of these dried up volcanic activity, has all these mounds that look like they've been like eroded, like came up and then just like seeped out and they dried up.
It was definitely a case where we can't have fluid simulation.
Désolé pour tous ces bruits-là. Là. Il y a de la construction près de chez moi. C'est un petit peu plate.
It was kind of cool
des fois,
to get that
micro,
look,
des fois,
especially once we did our first test, we were like, oh my god, it looks like a Geiger planet. So we toned it down a little bit, but I think we struck a nice balance. Then, like we said, Daymar has everything downward, so it's all about canyons and dips in the terrain. When you're on the horizon line, you don't see anything peeking out. You really wanted to have this heavy feeling where you go into the planet.
QA got a hold of this and just went mental flying through.
Yeah, you guys might remember seeing the trench run fly through. That gave us a bit of a nightmare. It's like, oh, didn't expect that to happen. But it's there, and you can actually do it yourself. So, then last one would be Yela, and we already described like this ice sheet that's there. You can see from a distance, and everything like the mountain range going up in contrast to like the flat areas that are very shiny and icy. So this is what it looks now, but I'm going to hand it over to Pascal because we brought some old stuff to sort of explain how we got to that point.
We kind of figure to make the stuff we're doing look, good. Sometimes we've got to show you like where we was, and that'll give you a little bit of a barometer reading of just the challenges, the mountain that we've had to climb. Because if you spin forward to the next slide, it's like this is where we started with, and it's like, okay, we've got some work to do, right?
We started much worse, actually. But we didn't bring those pictures. It's not very nice to look at. Basically, what you're looking at is just the bare terrain. It's just a height map. Instead of being completely flat, you have already a bit of definition of the terrain. So this is basically the first thing that comes in because it defines the major shapes of your planet. You get a kind of an idea of how it's going to feel in the future. And this is a very early shot where things were still in progress in terms of tech, and I think you can see it's very blurry. There was a lot of detail missing. Like one thing that we always, or is kind of a difficult thing to hit, is having it look from all kinds of distances. So you want to have it look good from space. You want to have it look good when you enter orbit. You want to have it looking good when you're on the surface itself.
Mm-hmm. One interesting thing to add is like all games make flat terrain. And the fact that we were able to make terrain that's completely spherical and just holds up and works, that's been a challenge in itself. So even when we got to that previous slide where it's like, this is terrain and it's like on a sphere and it's connected, and that was something new completely. Yeah. It brought its own set of challenges, obviously.
Just the idea that you can walk on forever and you'll end up at the same place at some point.
Yep.
A couple of days.
It's a very long walk.
I don't know, I never tried. And then there's a bit of improvement, some more detail. We had to add another layer of detail on top. And this is what you see here. Then in the front, you still see it's a little bit of blurriness, like how the textures go into each other. You have like snow going soft into rock. That was the next thing that we had to work on. So you see some early shots of how the terrain was blending. So here you see this colory map, the splat map, doing its work, saying here we have some soil, rock, snow, whatever. And then we just iterated on how we blend the textures together to get more variety and more variety until you have something more nice looking. And in the end, you end up with something like this, and you can have two completely different ecosystems right next to each other.
It was always a constant, almost like a daily conversation, where we'd be just, how do we get more? Because if you look at nature, right? If I had like a 2 by 2 meter square and I threw it down somewhere, just within that section, I'd have so much complexity. And then when we're talking about things on a planetary scale, we can't be like, okay, we're going to go from like there's a little moss and then soil and then grass and then this and buttercups. Like we can't go to that detail yet. So we've got to think about like this global. And then when you saw like those last few slides, which Pascal just showed, you can see like how we've progressed and progressed and progressed, and we're just seeing more and more and more depth in that scene. And then eventually, you just get like these breakthrough moments where you see something like this, and you're like, all right, okay, this is starting to feel quite good now.
Yeah, I think this was last year, the start of last year's Homestead, right?
Yeah. Mm. Okay, I think we have to pick up the pace a little bit.
Yep.
We haven't seen much variety. Well, we have quite a variety of rocks on our moons, but then we just wanted to put this in to show you there's also other stuff happening. We have a lot of vegetation coming in now, a lot more color. And one thing that we do is we reuse a lot of assets, because like having assets on the whole planet, you cannot make every rock unique, or you cannot do everything from the start again.
Yeah,
so we should try to figure out ways of getting quickly more variation by just reusing assets, but assigning different materials, getting different look.
Just to show how this works, we actually have to play the... So basically, like Pascal said, we cannot build infinite amount of assets, and we try to keep maintainable sets so we can actually increase the quality of the individual assets that we have in the set, instead of just trying to push out as many as possible. So what we try to do is like set it up so we can swap out materials and get a lot of variation and reuse out of that. So this video shows a quick swapping of the materials, plus an overview of like the asset sets that we have created for 3.0. So there's like different rock shapes, geysers, I guess, plateaus, and like this is all a first pass. And one of the things that we're looking forward to is like getting new shader tech to help increase the quality of these rocks as well, because
yeah. Usually what happens is you have like these intense bursts where you trying to figure something out, and you're hitting these brick walls, and then you get these, like I said, these eureka moments, and then that kind of pushes you into the next set. Yeah. And then usually what helps breaking you through to those next levels is finding out, you know, how do we all kind of collaborate together to achieve this? And then with everyone's combined hard work, then you go through to the next stage.
So another example of some of the flow assets that are ready to be used. They're not on the planet yet, but they might be soon.
Soon?
Yeah.
Soon. Look at those baobabs. Those guys are great. You're going to see a little bit of a breakdown later how we go about visually designing our botanicals. We put a lot of work into them. So when I see like these type of asset zoos, I get really excited. And if you look at that guy, it's like if you just go back one.
Oh, sorry.
It's a video.
Oh, it's a video. But see on the right of it's like this orange thing. And I think on Gamescom, someone on the stream asked, "What is that guy? Where that came from?" And Chris came to me and was like, "Okay, these moons are good. Can we add a little bit of flavor?" So we did a sprinkling of like unique elements, and that's one of the things we found. And he's a really cool guy and smells like hot death, apparently. But when you see these things, it just gives a little bit of life to it.
And the next step was scattering all these assets on the planet, which was, I mean, we figured out the terrain, we figured out how to apply the textures and everything, get a good variety, but still there's no assets. So in theory, it's still an empty level. Usually your level is full of assets. So we moved on to scattering assets. And there's also very early WIP, work in progress from a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And there it was very basic. We just tried to get assets on there. We tried to figure out a system that works. View distance was always a big problem, like getting things to show up really on very long distance, because you have to scatter so many assets, because the view distance in this game is ridiculous.
Do you remember when we did this and it was like, we put it on and then we all cheered because we were like, man, we've got a lot of assets on the surface, and then when you look at it, you're like...
There's no logic involved.
Yeah, and then you start thinking about other problems. So you've kind of pushed through one, you've like, okay, we can now scatter lots of assets. That doesn't freak the programmers out. So it's like, yeah, win. And then you look at it and you're like, right, because nature does things in a particular way, and as our eyes, when you look at things, if something doesn't look natural, it looks wrong, because you're used to seeing things in a very particular way, but trying to explain, because you're like, okay, this is wrong, and then to some people it's like, no, we've achieved it, we've scattered assets. But then when you start thinking about how nature works, you start understanding, all right, we need to add complexity to the way we scatter, or we need tech to maybe integrate these assets a little bit better. So it's always this constant push. You get a breakthrough, and then you're like, you just get hit by this whole other wave of problems that you never really saw before.
Almost constantly hitting the uncanny valley of environment art.
I think I say to everyone that we've hired, saying, no day is easy. You know, if you want to come and work at the Foundry, or at CIG, you know, every day is going to be hard because nothing that we do is easy. So you've got to be like prepared for that challenge. You've got to, hey man, this is a challenge. All right, okay, I'm gonna break through that.
C'est ça. Ils essaient vraiment là d'innover sur chaque aspect de chaque truc parce qu'ils savent que le jeu d'un il est seulement au PC, donc ils vont vraiment essayer d'utiliser le plein potentiel.
So, after we have our terrain shapes, we have our scattered assets. The last part would be the close-up details.
Mais c'est intéressant parce que tout au long de leur développement, ils nous ont donné des informations comme ça sur comment on développe un jeu. C'est rare qu'on voit ça. Là. Des fois, on attend la création d'un jeu pendant des années, tout ça. On entend parler un peu du développement, mais de vraiment tout voir comment ils créent les assets, comment ils conçoivent les mécaniques de jeu, comment ils designent les textures, comment ils assemblent les trucs, les bugs auxquels ils sont confrontés, comment ils règlent les bugs. Puis depuis le début, ils font ça.
One of the things we tried was using just scanned data because you don't have to build a tutoriel.
En tout cas, pour tous ceux qui ont envie un jour de peut-être travailler dans l'industrie du jeu vidéo ou quoi que ce soit, ou que ça les intéresse vraiment de savoir comment ça fonctionne, vous pouvez regarder la chaîne Star Citizen directement. Toutes les vidéos qu'ils ont mis depuis le début, là, vous n'aurez probablement pas le temps de toutes les écouter parce qu'il y en a tellement. Mais il y a tellement d'informations et tout ça. Là.
So this is a quick setup of how we do our typical materials. We have scanned height information that feeds into our textures.
Des fois, ça peut paraître pas intéressant pour certaines personnes parce que c'est un peu technique, mais des fois, c'est intéressant aussi de savoir comment les jeux sont faits. Des fois, pourquoi c'est long.
Between them if we want to make a red sand or a brown sand. Same for the rock types. And the way this graph is set up is it allows us to quickly determine like, oh, we're going to use a very, very rocky ground or almost no rocks. We want to scale them up. We want to have bumpy ground. And the sliders and all these controls are basically in this graph, but we don't tweak any of the physical values of these materials. So with this system, we managed to kick off like a set of materials for each location that is physically correct. It looks cool.
Ça donne 4 styles différents. Là.
How much information was in each texture. So the dusty, more moon-like textures for Selen with some dried lava flow. The Daymar palette, which is a bit more based on the Earth Sahara. And the Yela palette, which one of the cool things about Yela, I think, is because it has this frosty look. There's no loose soil flowing around. Everything is sort of stuck in place. Something that we wanted to represent in the materials as well. And I think these materials, when you get really up close, it's like the last step on top of all this variation that we tried to create between these different locations. But when we kicked off with the materials, we only had like one material over a very large area. And you can sort of see, like, if you would land here, it would feel very barren. And it's like, okay, well, this is it. People bragging about planets, and you get there, and then it's like, this is what you see. It's not making us happy, it's not making you guys happy. So with these new palettes and the way we blend all this stuff together, this is closer to what we have now. This is actually what we have now. So the palette of Selen coming together, you see the breakup between like, the more dense rock ground, the more dusty sand, the one for Daymar, and the one for Yela. And there was a happy accident with our blending on Yela because there was no ice shader. But sometimes you hit these happy accidents because we had soft blending between the materials. And if you look closely, you can sort of see underneath the ice layer, you can sort of still see the soil underneath. And it gave this nice frosted over look, and it almost made this ice look transparent. So there was a happy accident, but we'll take it until we have like a proper ice shader. And that will be coming at some point.
Yeah, Bob Ross came in that day and we had a happy accident. All right, okay, so once we've been doing all of this process, the tech's been advancing, the assets have been advancing, it gains us momentum. And before we can actually release and validate the final frame, it's a perfect opportunity to just do some quick paint overs, because what happens is as everyone's developing, everyone's kind of gets laser focused on one thing, because as Michelle's saying, it's like, I'm making my shader, and this is looking good, and Pascal's like, I'm doing my distribution system, and this is good. But as my job, I've got to make sure that we all put our art glasses on and we kind of validate the frame looks good. And what we do is we paint over and we make sure that we highlight stuff that's missing. And we kind of just say, again, you know, here's the things that we're still missing, you know, and it might be something that we introduce for that release, or it goes on the tech backlog of this is what we want to do in the future. So we do paint overs and we kind of really get the look and feel right. And, you know, the lighting team looks at this, the VFX team looks at this, and the art team, design team. And again, we just kind of align everyone back into that palette. So this is for things like selling, and then we sketch over, okay, we break down, okay, these are the things we're missing. So if you think back about scattering, you look back at, okay, what does nature do? And then when you understand what nature does, then indirectly that informs how we're going to need to do it. I mean, irrelevant whether it's on a small scale or a large scale, we always have to go back to nature, because as a player, you guys be playing it and you're like, wait a minute, this something's not right. Because any type of distribution system, if it's based on the algorithm or if it's based on logic, you're going to see repetition. Like, there's no system that's perfect, right?
And it's quite easy to get lost in the tools.
You're
just building stuff and you're putting more stuff on the planet, and you walk around like, whoa, this looks cool.
Yeah.
And you have to look back every once in a while to how nature does it.
There's sometimes arguments.
Yeah.
But sometimes you got to really evaluate what we're doing, because, you know, you might say, hey, we've ticked these boxes, we're doing it. But then we always need to push forward. And this is something that we're going to keep doing and doing and doing and doing until, you know, we're all finished and happy. So again, yellow, different things happening there. So we're describing what materials do, you know, what atmospheric conditions can kind of happen. And again with Damon. Tends to come back to very specific things. You know, how do shaders react under these kind of like physical conditions? How do objects get distributed? How do, if a piece of rock was in a desert for 20 years, what would it look like? You know, how do we make our shaders react to that? And usually what happens when we start breaking it down, we're like, okay, it doesn't do this, doesn't do this, doesn't do this. So it starts driving that tech forward, right? Okay, final implementation. So this is just like snapshots of where we're at. So this is what the current 3.0 build is like now. It's been a very engaging process between multiple disciplines, and kind of going back to what I was saying at the start, it's hard, right? You know, this is crazy, this sort of things we're doing. It's never been done before. But everyone has to come to work charged, they'll get knocked down, they'll hit with problems, they go home and just think, man, but they could always come in the next day, and we always try and figure it out. So something like Telin, you know, that tight, high contrast vibe. Something like Yella, Dema, all good. So I think everyone that's on the team is super happy with what we've managed to achieve, even though we're just describing that small corner of the system. So Stanton system, right? It's a corporate business part based on law. Actually, I like to think about it, it's the building ground for our pipeline and tools. So what I mean by that is, you know, this is the challenge we're facing on working in this corner, but we can't go through all of these systems, figuring out. So we see the Stanton system, it's where we build our tools, we build our pipeline, and then once we get that solid foundation, that's going to empower the art team and the various other disciplines to just create, right? So without that solid foundation, you can't really go off, right?
Mais oui.
Need to recharge. Okay, how does the sausage get made? Right. We're just going to little switch out. So that says 1 minute, 33 seconds left.
Yeah, that's not a lot of time. So
1 minute, 33
maybe some
seconds.
of you guys recognize this. This is Daymore. We're here in the sandbox. This is basically what we work with. And I'm just going to show you a little bit how, or a little bit of the tools. Mostly
Sorry, just do that one more time. In and out, one more time. In and out.
In real time.
I can't describe to you how cool that is, right?
And like working on this stuff and seeing it happen for the first time,
C'est juste fou, ça.
A couple of weeks, if not months, to get your head around like the amount of space that you actually have to work on. And we have really good tools, but at the same time, it's yeah.
Just going in and out, man. That's all we need to show. We should have started with it. That's all we need to show, right? And if you actually go inside that outpost, it's not just the organics, but the way we place our point of interest. It's all there. You know, you could fly in there if you want. But anyway, Pascal's going to do his thing, right?
Maybe just do a quick eco swap.
Don't know what's going to go on in 20 seconds.
Okay, I'm just going to ruin this planet a little bit for you guys. So basically, what a planet looks like in the beginning is like this. There's really nothing going on. There's just a whole lot of emptiness with just one big texture on it. And then we start to bring in these ecosystems. This is kind of what you saw earlier on the shots. Draw in your height maps.
C'est là qu'il y a le design de A à Z. Ils sont en train de faire la planète.
You can see a whole lot of repetition. So this is basically one ecosystem repeating itself without any procedural randomization. And it's also pretty flat.
Magic numbers he's typing in right now. Do you want to bring that over to the main screen? Just bring that tool over.
Ah, ben ouais, là, ça a donné plus de variété.
This is basically the tool that we work with. This is called the Planet Editor. There's a whole lot of numbers and stuff. Not very interesting to look at, but that's basically what we work in all the time. But yeah, we get the visuals over here, so that's quite gratifying. And then basically from this height map information, we go over to a textured version. We get something like this. We have all our textures on there, all the materials, but still it's very empty. You still have the particles in the preset. And then basically the last iteration that we do is getting all of the assets back in there. And you end up with something like this. Now this is just a couple of seconds. It actually takes quite some time to do all this.
He's done it in 20 seconds.
Done.
C'est ça, ils peuvent faire des trucs plus complexes que ça, mais c'est pour nous montrer un peu vraiment comment ça marchait. Sauf que ça donne vraiment quelques clics comme ça donne vraiment un résultat assez fou.
So we've got, do you want to switch out? We've got 1 minute 37 seconds.
Leur moteur de création de planète procédural est assez excellent. Ça, c'est tous des trucs, justement, on se demandait, mais où s'est passé tout ce temps de développement-là? Ils ont créé tous ces outils-là de zéro, cet engin-là de développement de planète procédurale, ils ont créé ça de zéro, ils n'ont pas acheté ça en quelque part puis ils s'en ont servi. Pas comme les développeurs qui servent du même engin pour créer tout ce qu'ils font ou bien qui prennent Unreal Engine 4. Eux autres, ils ont pris, un engin existant, le CryEngine, mais ils l'ont tellement modifié que c'est un nouvel engin de jeu. Puis en plus, ils ont tous ces outils-là à part qu'il a fallu qu'ils développent.
Particularly in between, like where there's this the big building of the family. How does that sit around?
Puis tous ces outils-là, après ça va être des propriétés intellectuelles du studio. Ça peut valoir très cher. Ils peuvent vendre ça après ça à d'autres studios justement pour faire des développements similaires.
It's a corporation run amok, so they'd have these huge dumping grounds, and then this starts informing like the assets we're going to need, but also type of animals. Check that armadillo out; he's sweet. Moving on. And then things like when we go to
honnêtement là,
Microtech, you know, the domes of New Babbage, that's going to be cool.
À quelque chose.
But then also like the headquarters.
En faisant appel justement à des backers au lieu de faire affaire avec un gros publisher pour les jeux, puis justement de prendre de l'argent d'investisseurs privés, tout ça, puis après ça d'être sous la bannière d'un publisher. Ben, ce que ça donne, la possibilité aussi, oui, ils ont du temps pour développer, mais le fait qu'il y ait du temps pour développer, ils ont l'argent puis le temps pour développer des nouvelles techniques puis des nouveaux moteurs de création, un peu justement comme le moteur de planète, des trucs procédurales, des trucs qui vont être vraiment à la fine pointe de la technologie, puis même
in there. So they'd be
peut-être
like,
les meilleurs
okay, we
justement
know a bit
dans,
about
dans leur
technology. So
genre.
they almost
Fait que c'est peut-être quelque chose qui va pouvoir
help the plants a
redéfinir
little
un peu
bit. So then it was like, maybe
les,
there's like a type
les
of
standards dans le
bioweave in
jeu
there. So
vidéo.
anyway, we get into this
Mais
crazy
ça,
detail. So every
avoir ces
botanical that you see in our game goes through this very
logiciels-là qui ont développé eux-mêmes,
rigid
c'est
visual development
vraiment
process. We're
excellent.
wondering what that guy is. And if you think about on the
C'est ça qui
outside
peut
of that
faire
dome,
qu'ils vont devenir
if you've been inside this calm interior
qui vont faire de l'argent aussi à un moment donné parce qu'ils vont
then
sûrement
on the
vendre
outside you're just going to
ces
get blasted,
outils-là à
right?
d'autres
Because this was a
studios,
terraforming accident.
c'est
So
juste trop fou.
this landscape's wild. And then again, the botanicals. What would the botanicals have been like if they would have been blasted since, you know, every day they were growing, so everything would be leaning. So it'd be kind of cool as if you're going across the landscape, everything's just to kind of one side. And then going to my personal favorite, like Arzen, the floating landscapes, the floating lattice, we've seen this. But then how do we push that further forward? So within the Stanton system, okay, you've got Hurston Dynamics, I've been there and polluted, all that sort of thing. I've gone to Arcorp, it's Perpetual City, I've gone to Microtech, I'm going to get blasted, right? I wanted somewhere where there's a little bit of a nice landscape to kind of relax in. So from the law, you know, it's more about the recreation. So I was thinking it'd be beautiful to have like these gardens overlooking these vistas, and then flags because I love flags, but also because I wanted to build it like a subliminal palette. So say, for example, you're in Pyro System on a base, and you're having a good time, and then occasionally you'll see like this logo of this top corner, and if you see, it's like a triangle with these 3 triangles within it, and that reflects to how the gardens are, you know, how the architecture, how these seats are arranged. And you'll look at that and you go, man, I want to go to Crusader again. But it's not going to be that quick journey. So again, we're extending the palette so it feels a bit more like a space opera. So if you wanted to go from system to system, that's going to take a long time, right? And again, trees. You know, we've got trees on Crusader. What would it be like if they grew up like high up above a gas giant? You know, I wanted something that didn't feel like a bonsai, but almost felt just as beautiful, just from a pure silhouette. And again, the cloud layer, if you look at the canopy on this, it almost reflects the kind of shape language that you get in a particular type of clouds. All right, we're 6 minutes over.
Hold on. Before
yes.
questions, we're running a little short on time, so I'm not sure how much Q&A we'll have. Before we got into questions, though, I wanted to introduce Andy Green to the stage, if you can come on up. He is the CEO of Acme Atronomatic, the makers of the MyRadar app. Andy and his company are in the process of using our planets in a way that we didn't originally intend, so he's going to talk for a bit on what they're doing.
Thank you, Brian. So as Brian said, my name's Andy Green. I am a huge fan of Star Citizen. I've been a backer since the beginning in 2012. And I'm a firm believer in Chris's vision of the game. But during my day job, I'm the CEO of a company called Acme Atronomatic. And among other things, we make a cool mobile weather app called MyRadar. So it's fairly popular in the States. We've got about 10 million active users, and the app has been around since 2008. Over the years, we've gotten very good at visualizing all sorts of weather and weather-related data, and in displaying that data on maps. And we've even spread out a bit in that we're now able to show NASA satellite imagery for other planetary bodies like Mars, giving users a new way to view the red planet. So one day in this epiphany of nerddom, I thought to myself, how cool would it be if we could use this technology to render virtual worlds? So earlier in the year, being such a big Star Citizen fan, I reached out to CIG to see if they were interested in experimenting. And they thought the idea sounded cool. So with a little bit of help from them, we took the high-resolution data for their procedurally generated moons. We massaged and molded the data a little bit and put it into a format we could use. And we now have the ability to display the moons of Star Citizen Alpha 3.0 within the MyRadar app.
That is cool.
Okay.
That is cool.
So users can pan around the globe and zoom in to see specific landscape and geographical features of the moon. And you can get in close enough to see the ice sheets of Yela and the deep canyons of Damar. The detail is even good enough that if you find an ideal crater,
ça, j'aime moins ça qu'ils fassent des partenariats comme ça avec plein de trucs. Là.
There's also a details section you can pull down that reveals additional information on each moon, including its atmospheric composition, atmospheric pressure, the details of its orbit, the actual size of the moon itself, as well as some other interesting facts. So, with this collaboration, MyRadar gives players the chance to get an early exploratory look at the 3 moons of Crusader. And if you make sure you've got the latest version of MyRadar, the Star Citizen features can be accessed today with a free download, and it's available now on both Google Play and the Apple App Store. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, like I said, we didn't originally have this intent in mind, but it's awesome you're able to grab that and work with us and do that. So unfortunately, with us running a little bit late, we don't have time for Q&A. But I'll make sure that I kick these guys out from backstage, out to the floor, so feel free to find them and ask more questions. We'll be back in 5-10 minutes with the Consolidated Outland Pioneer presentation, and that's going to be pretty cool. So, see you in a bit.
Une autre petite présentation tantôt, dans 5-10 minutes. On va se retrouver pour cette présentation-là. Moi, je vais laisser ça comme ça. Pour l'instant, le fil va continuer quand même. Donc, s'il y a des trucs qui jouent, ça va continuer de jouer. Je vais juste enlever le son du bruit.
Then there is the jump point transitions, which is, you're going to navigate through a jump point and it's basically a fold in time and space, and you're going to come out somewhere else in the galaxy. And we're sort of playing with that. I mean, the original concept that I've always talked about is sort of kind of the idea of sort of surfing this huge breaking wave like on the North Shore of Hawaii. But we're sort of feeling like it's almost going to be sort of, it's time and space bent around itself and almost like moving parts of it and tunnels and holes, and you sort of have to navigate the right way through it. And as things are moving, it sort of makes it slightly challenging. And anyway, so it should require a certain amount of skill to navigate it if you're navigating it for the first time.
You guys are jerks. You know that? Hey, Ulf, what do you got? I'm done. Seriously? Seriously? Right after the Red One thing, we have, is that the first legitimate issue we've had in the broadcast? And it happens directly after? Do I have audio? Okay. I don't know. I don't know if Twitch chat's messing with me. You guys voted on that. I put up that thread. I said, let's vote on your top 10 favorite moments. Let's vote up our top 10 moments. All right. We hear you. Okay, they say we hear you. They're in my ears. They're messing with me now. I put that thread up. You guys voted. And seriously, number 3, Red One. All right. All right. So we're going to just go to some crowds and we'll find out. Go to some crowds. We'll be back. All right. Seriously. Guys, welcome. CitizenCon 2947, Exploring New Worlds. My broadcast team thought they'd have a little fun at my expense. Thank you, everybody, for watching so far. This has been the biggest and baddest CitizenCon yet. Thank you to our partners at Intel for helping sponsor the event. I hope you've enjoyed the show. So far, we've seen panels on animation and how the procedural tech improves that. We've seen panels on the Xi'an language and the Xi'an design. We've seen panels on our engine programming. And, of course, we just finished panels on the art and tech of Stanton. Coming up next, probably one of the most anticipated panels of the evening, the Consolidated Outlands Pioneer with design director Todd Pappy, lead technical designer John Crew, and art director Paul Jones. Of course, after that panel is the Star Citizen CitizenCon 2947 keynote address by none other than founder and CEO Chris Roberts. So keep an eye out for that. That will be coming immediately after the next panel. So I am just waiting to hear that they're ready to go. They are doing a last-minute changeover of panel things because that last panel did run a little over long. Meanwhile, I hear we do have Ulf. Ulf is in the Tech Gallery atrium. Ulf, what you got for us? Nothing. Nope. They come back to me. Okay, nope. We thought we'd try. We were doing so good. All right, well, in the atrium, we have a number of fantastic activities there. We've got the Face over IP demo that's going on. People are able to sit down at machines and actually test the Face over IP technology. We've got a Creating Planets panel where the guys that you just saw are out there doing a live version of the demo that we just saw. We've got building solar systems where people are using Solid. We've got designing locations where our level designers are showing how they create maps for like Starmere stuff. And of course, we are building a weapon live here at CitizenCon with the input of everybody. So now in my headset, I have the official 2-minute warning. We're just about ready to start our next panel, the Consolidated Outlands Pioneer. So I'm going to sign off and have me a non-alcoholic beverage. We'll see you later, everybody.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Went long?
Long, but you know what? This is the crowd for that. If there's any game crowd in the world that likes long, detailed, technical explanations.
Is it too deep?
And I think what we do is maybe we get you guys on a happy hour, and we follow up on this stuff. We do the Q&A on one of the broadcasts like that. I tried to have you on before. And we get you the Q&A that deserves. Okay.
Drug? Non, on dirait qu'ils ont un petit peu de retard sur leur nouveau panel. Ah, ça va commencer. Et comme ils ont dit, après ça, la présentation du CitizenCon, après ce panel-là, ça va être la présentation officielle.
Stars. They've become such a familiar backdrop of our day-to-day life that it's easy to forget what they mean. That one. That little dot right there. That's Bremen. This one over here.
Ça, là, c'est le genre de personnage qu'on va avoir dans le jeu. C'est ça que ça va avoir les cinématiques.
Handful of these dots represents the breadth of human expansion. Another handful, and you've got Bannon, Jean, even Van Duel systems. That's everything we've ever known. Every piece of art, every life, ever, right there. In 2 handfuls of dots. And that means there's so much more to find. Behind every one of those points of light is a story waiting to be discovered. Now, in our distant past, it was the province of governments to explore and understand space. The simple launch took resources and money beyond the capacity of even the largest companies. But then RSI introduced the Zeus, and suddenly regular people were able to explore our solar system, allowing an unprecedented amount of knowledge to be discovered. When Nick Croshaw discovered the first jump point, the modified scanner array that allowed him to search for jump points were far too expensive for the civilian market. But once that technology was refined and open to the public, what happened? That's right, an era of expansion that led us from this to this. And that's how it's always been. If you look at all the great eras of human history, whenever innovation has put technology in the hands of the people, it has heralded sweeping discoveries. Because power in the hands of many will always exceed the power of few. So while we can now discover new jump points and systems, there's still one hurdle that remains. That's what to do once you discover a new planet. Because right now, only the largest corporations can terraform and establish settlements. Easy. We haven't simplified terraforming yet. No, I'm here to announce something equally exciting. Albert Einstein, the man who redefined human understanding of the universe, he once said, "The person who follows the crowd will usually go no further than the crowd. The person who walks alone is likely to find himself in places no one has ever seen before."
Il parle du jeu aussi en même
An
temps.
insightful sentiment meant to inspire thinkers and creators to push the
Le
boundaries.
discours et il parle
Their
du jeu en
understanding.
même temps. Okay,
It was, after all, said 1,000 years ago, before humanity had left our homeworld. So clearly he was speaking metaphorically.
C'est un petit message
Today, as I just showed you,
à tous les détracteurs de Star
the unknown
Citizen
is out
par
there,
moi.
waiting to be discovered. For those that are looking for those places that no one has seen before, they are faced with a daunting challenge. What do you do when you get there? Up until now, it's been the province of governments and corporations to pave the way for sustained habitation. The power has been in the hands of the few. What if I offered you the ability to build your own settlement? To bring civilization to the most untamed of frontiers?
Quoi?
A colony ship in the truest sense of the word.
On va
And I'm not talking about just transporting people, no. I'm talking about an all-in-one solution designed to build modular structures based on your needs. Capable of building a farm or a habitat, a trading post or a mining operation. I mean, that'd be crazy, right? Allow me to introduce the Pioneer.
Ah ben, ok. C'est ça l'annonce qui disait qu'il changerait le gameplay. On va pouvoir bâtir. Ben, voyons donc. Ok. La colonisation. Direct là. Ok. Pioneer.
With that, let the new age of colonization begin.
Ben ouais, ok, ça, ok. Ouais. J'imagine que ça applaudit dans la salle pour vrai aussi. Ça, c'est...
That's pretty cool. If you're interested in building Outpost, you're definitely going to want to check that out. We have all the info about it already up online, so you can feel free to go website and check out more detail. This panel
Ça, c'était pas censé arriver avant un bon bout, là, les trucs de colonisation, mais...
If you're interested about it, it's going to talk about the aesthetics, the technical design, and how it actually functions in-game. So... without further ado, I have Todd Pappy, our Star Citizen Live Director from the German office. John Crew, Lead Technical Designer from the UK office. Mr. Paul Jones, Art Director from the UK office. And Mr. Tony Z, Director of Persistent Universe out of Boston.
Chance qu'ils l'ont créé, ce petit studio-là.
It's up to you guys.
Au UK parce que il a fait tellement pour le jeu. Là.
So we're here to talk about the Pioneer and other things that are associated with it. So, all right, we'll get into it. So, like Brian said, we've got Artsy Honcho, we've got SC Honcho, we've got Live Honcho, and Tech Honcho. All right, so staking your claim. So the idea behind this is kind of the land settlements that happened in the States in 1889. And with this ship, it is built to go and settle unknown lands. So before we even thought about this, before we even got into it, there was a couple of prerequisites that we felt needed to be done. First one being procedural planets that you guys have seen. Now, obviously, that creates a huge, massive play area that we need to fill with gameplay. And in essence, we're letting you guys fill it. Then the other thing is that we needed to establish the two ends of the spectrum. So we've got cities that you guys have seen with Area 18, and then we've got outposts, and then in the middle we've got villages, which we'll introduce later. But now that we have outposts, that's basically our campsites. And then procedural building tech. And I think that you guys have seen some of that stuff, and then I'm sure that we'll show you more in the future. So where the ship fits into the game is a mid to long-term ship. It's for building and placing outposts. And like Brian said, we'll go into more detail about it on this panel. And then the thought process behind it is that this is for orgs or for a single player that wants to run AI. Okay.
So I'll quickly talk about the normal process of ship design that we do. We've talked on ATV lots about it. If you've grabbed me around the building, I've talked to you about it. It's usually a pretty linear process. So we get a super simple design brief from a director. Like we get Chris, Ben Lesnick, Todd, Tony. They go, I want this ship to do this. And then we go away, the tech design department, and we expand that to a one-page design brief to make sure we've interpreted what they want correctly. That is high-level stats, so rough dimensions, rough armament, rough speeds, rough size. We have a kickoff meeting based around that with all the directors. They give their buy-in. Then we go away and we do a super simple white box in Engine just to block out the shapes, because it's one thing saying we want a ship to be 50 meters and we want it to do X, Y, Z, but if you can't actually fit those three things in it, there's no point it being 50 meters. So then we quickly validate that. It's either made from solids or we use existing assets from existing ships and just smash them together, which Paul loves to see. Well, it's lovely work, just crushed together. That gets signed off. It goes into concept and tech design go hand in hand, just constantly iterating, gets signed off, and then when it's all signed off, use it. So for the Pioneer, we did it slightly differently. So we had the high-level design brief. We want to have a ship that creates outposts. So, well, okay, that's quite a big bit of gameplay. So we don't know how we're going to do that, or we didn't know how we were going to do that at the time. And then the other really interesting part was we want it to be consolidated outlands, which we have the Mustang, and trying to extrapolate that up to the huge scale. It's like, well, all the other manufacturers, we know what little ships look like, big ships. We can't just take a Mustang and go, it's going to be ridiculous. So,
we should have. Well, we could try.
So what we did first, we talked with Nathan Dearsley and Paul. We didn't do a white box for it, which is quite an unusual process. They went away and did all mood boards, concepts of what they want consolidated outlands to look like, which Paul will show you some of the early stuff, because it was very clear from that what shape and form the ship would take. There's no point in us making boxes if the ship's going to be a round flying disc. It's not going to work. So we got those back, and you can see the round and round bit in the middle, where we got the concept. Chris liked it, signed it off, did a white box, went with art. I was like, no, that doesn't work. Round and round we go, till everyone was happy, signed off, and that was that. So some quick ship stats. The new ship matrix went live last night at some point. So we've gone through every ship in the game and updated all their stats to the best that we know of. And we're going to keep that more up to date. It's a much simpler process now. Anything you see up there with a dash is because we don't know where it's fully going to be. We'd rather give you the numbers when they're not going to change, rather than what we have in the past. So it's like this. Everyone sits on it for 3 years and goes, why is it not like that anymore? We'll give you it when we have some solid numbers. But the numbers we do have there are the ones we do know about. So it's 200 meters long, which is quite big. It's a capital size ship, which if you've read all the shipyard posts we've been doing over the last 2 weeks, explains that. It's got 600 SEU of cargo, which is used for building the bases. A minimum crew of 4 and a max crew of 8. It supports 8 living on it, so you can just about get by doing 4. So it is a team effort to do this stuff. On the next bit is the more detailed breakdown. And this actually didn't change much from the initial brief that we did. Things like thrusters always change as we build the ships out and work out where the best place for them was. And the only bit that actually changed was the turrets. So we went from having 4 manned turrets to having 2 manned turrets and 2 unmanned turrets. And that was, as we were going over the shapes, obviously to get to a manned, or to use a manned turret, you need to get a man to that turret, which in itself creates restrictions on sizes and shapes. By taking that out of the equation, you can have much more interesting shapes and feel, and the person controlling that turret is just sat somewhere in a nice central location to use it. So yeah, that hopefully you can all see on the website now and look in more detail at it. Paul?
You're going to trust me with the clicker? All right, let's go. So this is the art side of the talk. This is a pretty good question to ask. Obviously, John's explained sort of the initial part of the process. It's, you know, the ships, it's pretty different to what we've had to deal with before. It's been dealt with generally by one of the concept team in the UK. And he's done very well to remain sane throughout this process. So it has been very challenging, but what I'm going to give you now is a sort of high-level process of how we've approached this ship, a little bit of sort of behind the scenes, and then sort of more of an explanation of where we've arrived, how we've arrived, and hopefully you guys will really like it. So this is my favorite new buzzword that I came up with specifically for this talk. So I think these 3 lines basically describe how we sort of approach this ship. And especially with this ship, we basically, it was kind of different to the other ships in the past. So basically this one was very clear, you know, it was utilitarian. It was basically monolithic manufacturing. It's basically, you've got a huge brick of a ship, essentially. But obviously that doesn't look cool, so, you know, we go through various stages to make this look good. So throughout the whole process and throughout the sort of whole design philosophy of the ship, it's basically an asymmetrical design. So you'll see on the exterior it's asymmetrical. The bridge is asymmetrical, it's cantilevered, the corridors are asymmetrical, and this throws, it's basically in the DNA of this ship. And, you know, John has mentioned previously that obviously we've had the Mustang, which is one of our, I guess, really early ships from Consolidated Outlands, and not really a lot of work had been done in terms of the style guide. And really they're more of a separate division. So this is more of your industrial division. So it's kind of like the Reclaimer, which is like the industrial Aegis. So right off the bat, you know that you're dealing with function over form. It's not going to be like super sexy. It's not going to be pretty, but it's still going to have a really good sort of well thought out industrial design feel to it. So, you know, even as you're walking through this thing, you're still going to appreciate it, and you've got your own essentially flying factory. So this next slide, this basically sort of shows the sort of initial development. So what normally happens is that we always provide Chris with a series of options. He always, you know, if we give him one, he's never happy. He wants to see 3, 4. You know, the more he can see, the more options, the better. Which is great. You know, we're totally used to it. We know how to work fast. You know, that's, you know, you don't really sort of set your heart on anything, but you know, you keep pushing for what you like, ideally. So we provide Chris with all these options of how this ship can look good, but also, you know, not be a flying brick. So basically, there's a lot of transformation. We still have technical issues, well, not technical issues, technical requirements that we need to take into account with this. But at this stage, we hand this off to Chris, and he's able to then give us feedback. He's able to pick from A, pick from B, say, oh, I like the color from J, and then basically we go on to the next round of feedback. So this is where we start sort of dialing in. We've taken what Chris likes, and again, it's just super loose, super rough. You know, we are dealing with mesh work that we're just sort of crashing together. We're not being all precious about this stuff. So we're basically just going for an aesthetic with a hint of the functionality. That's already sort of been sort of factored in with talks with design. And what you'll see here is like in a sort of really, you know, we've got the next few slides are very sort of behind the scenes. There's sort of the stuff that that goes on at people's desks, and people are drawing on their Wacoms. And this shows, you know, you can tell this is an early one because this is actually flipped the other way. But you can see really early on that that we dialed in to what we wanted for this ship. So you've got the bridge, you know, it's very much like the bridge of an oil tanker. You're overlooking your ship. It's good visibility. You can see your whole manufacturing process, and you know, basics, turrets, and how this is going to work. And again, these are really, apologies for the sort of small resolution, but here you can sort of, it gives you an indication of the sort of the block-out process in terms of the animation and the manufacturing process. So this is not a 3D printer. It is a manufacturing plant. So you're essentially, you'll be taking your panels, materials, almost like IKEA, dare we say?
I would say more like a car manufacturer or something.
Right,
like that.
so more like Tesla, let's say. Yeah. I prefer Tesla, and it definitely suits more with the sort of the video you guys have just seen. And so you can see the sort of amount of detail that the concept artist is putting in for the manufacturing plant. And basically you've got two arms, and that's basically where everything gets built, and then in the center it all gets assembled. There's a little bit of magic that goes on in there, and then basically the crane comes in and takes your pods. So this is a, I guess, final concept model, so we're jumping right ahead in the process. And as you can see, this is it starting to articulate. This is once you've landed and found a suitable landing site. You've got an arm that's articulating out. There is a turret on this arm, and it's also sort of providing an extra sense of perimeter to your base. The area in blue is essentially the crane, and once everything has been assembled, this crane comes in, takes the habitation pods out of there, moves it to the front of the ship, so that then there's still space for additional pods, and depending on how you've configured it. And then again, this is kind of just sort of showing you the process of where the cargo is inserted, and it basically runs down both arms, ultimately meets in the middle. And you know, as a player, you'll be able to see a ton of this going on. You'll have all the equipment, you'll have all the robot arms. You know, as you're playing it or as you're walking around your base, you should really get a good feel of what's going on. Swiftly moving on. This is just some quick outlines, just sort of outlining the top view, basically, of the bridge. Again, asymmetrical feel, cantilevered design. Inside there you have habitation, which we'll see examples of after this. Some hefty landing gear, because this is quite a large ship. Additional cargo space, as well as a landing pad which is above further cargo space, and that landing pad can articulate, move out of the way. Staging area, this is where all your robots are, this is where everything is getting sort of built, essentially, from your materials. and then manufacturing is where all the magic happens. Moving on, these are some of the final images that basically have been built for this ship, so you can see the habitation pod there already. And you can see there's walkways in there, so as a player you'll be able to come out. You know, I guess if you're in a nice calm situation, you'll be able to come out and see all your cool equipment. If you're in a combat situation, hopefully you'll have more, you know, a good advantage or possibly disadvantage for firefights, depending on if you have people taking over your base. And then this is the bridge. And this is pretty cool. You can see on the sort of far left-hand side, there's a little blue monitor. It actually looks quite small, but that's actually the architect's station. So that's the console, basically, where you're designing your configuration, I guess. So you're choosing 1 pod, 2 pod, 5 pods. Moving on, rather cool engine room. You know, basically this will be a large open space. Again, asymmetrical from the top. You've got some really interesting turbines that should give us some really cool animation opportunities. And it's very different to anything that we've seen so far in the Star Citizen universe. Habitation, obviously you've got space for a couple of big bennies. Everybody wants big bennies in their ship. And then split level room, so space for chilling out, just watching TV or just having dinner with your friends. Bunk room, again, very utilitarian, very basic, down to basics. You could, if you look closely, you can see one crew member in one of the pods, just lying down. And this is just a quick slide put together, just to give you an indication of comparative sizes. Again, you've got a little Mustang in there, which will fit on the landing pad. And finishing up, this is sort of final rendering of just showing the ship in its full glory. And it's still, you know, even though it is utilitarian and sort of quite big and massive, you know, monolithic, again with this sort of graphical branding, it's kind of still giving it. We've broken up the shapes, we've given it a really sort of futuristic feel, and I'm pretty happy with it. Yeah. You want it? Click. Yeah. So I'm now going to hand over to Tony.
Okay. So before you can actually begin construction of your new outpost, you'll need to first select and purchase a plot of land. The value of that land, what you're going to have to pay in order to acquire it, depends upon a variety of objective criteria, as well as the seller's insight into that information, which we collectively refer to as knowledge. One of the things that we track for each section of land that you can potentially purchase is the resources present and the quantity. Another one is the current market value, which will obviously impact the value of land. If the land has an abundance of a particular mineral that at that particular point in time is, you know, exceptionally valuable, then that's going to increase, you know, the current value of that land. But it's a very dynamic process. The level of certainty, that's interesting in that knowledge, information within Star Citizen is very often an analog concept. You don't necessarily know something or not know something, but rather you know things to varying degrees. And the easiest way that I could, you know, give for an example would be to consider a car that you're thinking about purchasing. If you're being asked to purchase a car and you haven't actually seen it, you're going to be very conservative in terms of your estimate of what it might be worth. If you're able to see it even from the exterior and verify there's tread on the wheels, the paint job looks okay, etc., then that's going to increase your perception of its value. If you're able to actually, turn the car on, make sure it's running, or better yet, have a mechanic, take a peek under the hood, then that's going to basically bring it, even farther up the scale. And so a lot of what we're doing, with the value of land, which ties over into the Pioneer, because you're going to be setting up these outposts ideally in optimal locations to exploit a lot of this value that's sitting on the surface of these planets. The next one up would be when the info was last verified. Knowing that there is, a vast abundance of gold at a particular area, but the information is stale. It's 2 weeks old, it's a month old, it's 6 weeks old. As it gets more out of date, it becomes less and less valuable. And so what this means is that players will routinely have to refresh, the knowledge of a particular area in order to maintain the perceived land value within the game. The last thing that I'd mention in regards to what constitutes knowledge is the value of location. If you've got a field
c'est tous des concepts que j'avais jamais entendu parler.
Proximity to a refinery, potentially at an outpost set up by one of these pioneers, then that ore field, the land that what you'd have to pay to actually purchase that land is going to rise in price. If on the other hand there's no refinery on that planet, and you have to basically spend 20 minutes basically carting the ore to another refinery and then getting it to its eventual destination, that's going to lower the lower the perceived value of that plot of land. So knowledge within the game is a really fundamental concept, and knowledge is a concept that once you've acquired it about a certain area or a certain object, you're able to transfer that to other friends, you're able to transfer that to organizations, you're able to sell that information to public information brokers, or freely submit it into the public domain.
So yeah, Tony talks about knowledge, what it all means, but to get that knowledge, you've got to go and find that area to figure out what's there. Is it right for you? And that's where all the exploration ships come in. You could take your Pioneer and do all this with your Pioneer, but it's probably not going to be the best ship for scouting locations. We've got a whole wealth of exploration ships that are designed for finding that information out. It's like you wouldn't take your oil rig out into the ocean and just randomly dot it down until you found what you wanted. They send the scouts out to find the best locations. So the ships we mentioned there's just a small range of the exploration ships, like the 315P, Terrapin, Carrack. All exploration, all have slightly different pros and strengths. So you've got the single ones, you've got the big crews, and they're just there to help find where you want to send your Pioneer to. You might find a nice location, but if you went there in your Pioneer, you're never going to find out where the nearest refinery, like Tony talked about. You could build it and you find it's millions of miles away, and that's going to be a waste. So these exploration ships are really sort of key to finding those places.
Yeah, and one of the things we're aiming to do is make sure that there's a lot of gameplay associated with these high-level concepts. And by that I mean, if you discover, if you're working your long-range scanners, you may find a previously unknown body, an asteroid that no one else within the system knows about, and there is a level of value related to that. If you work your dials a little bit and you've got the proper equipment and skills, then without actually having to make the journey, you could increase the potential value of that of that knowledge find by being able to discern, the mass of the object. A large asteroid is going to be, all things, being equal, be worth more than a smaller asteroid. But if you really want to ratchet it up, and this kind of goes back to the degrees of knowledge that I was talking about, if you actually make the journey to it, fly over, burn fuel, burn time, brave whatever dangers are between you and there, and you actually do a flyover of the surface, then you may actually just visually see, pools of hydrocarbons, gas venting from the surface. And again, that raises up what you know about it all the more. If you really want to get specific about what's there and maximize the potential value of that find, though, then you're going to have to set down on the surface and you're...
Oh, il y a un petit lag.
Actually going to do, you're going to take core samples, and you're going to basically have these processed, analyzed, and you're going to do things like seismographic surveys and have, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of this plays into a common theme that we're trying to execute upon, which is all of these high-level ideas and stuff have a variety of different ways by which the player community can basically attack them, and by which these things will feed, the outputs of one into the inputs of another.
So now that Tony's kind of given you a high-level idea of what land is and how we value it, I'm going to talk about actually claiming your land. So first and foremost, claims are not tied to the pioneer. A single person, organization can buy them, so on and so forth. Then we have the concept of UEE space, non-UEE space. If you settle in UEE space, you need to have a claim. If you're brave enough and you don't want to do it, you can venture out to non-UEE space, and then there you can find some of your shadier things that you want to do in the game. So if you do plant it in the UEE space, then the idea is that you get the protection from the UEE, in case somebody comes and attacks you and stuff like that. It will be transferable between players. Like any good government, the UEE will actually take a cut of that in a title transfer cost. We're doing general licenses. Later on, the UEE will portion out licenses. So when it comes to actually claiming the beacon or claiming your lands, you'll have a beacon interaction. So you set down your beacon. This is where I want to go. And either yourself, one of your teammates, or a data runner will take this information to the closest UEE colony office, and basically that's when it locks in, and now that land is yours.
Yeah, so one of my favorite aspects about just the overall concept of land is actually speculation. And the basic idea is that assume that you've purchased land and you've gone out and you either bought it with foreknowledge that it likely contain these minerals, et cetera, or you discovered that yourself. And so now you're holding on to this land, and the decision you'll face is, well, do I basically extract that value right now? If whatever that land contains is currently in a bear market, it's not worth very much, then you may elect to basically wait to harvest whatever it holds until those particular commodities have price. And it sounds simple, but there's a lot of ripple effects to where we get really interesting knock-on gameplay effects. And by this I mean, when you own land, that doesn't prevent someone else from necessarily going in there and extracting those resources. Now, obviously, if you're doing this within UEE space and you basically sit down and you're extracting resources from someone else's property, then that's a criminal offense, and basically the game's security system will deal with them as appropriate. But, of course, the police aren't patrolling, every square inch of every planet, every asteroid, every moon, every minute of the day. And so you holding on to that property, waiting for, a better payday in the future, has real implications in terms of, well, in addition to relying upon the system security, do you want to put your own sensors there so that you're alerted when someone else does something that you don't like on that area of land? So if somebody starts mining, you'll basically be notified, and then you and potentially your org mates can head out there and basically push them off. You may hire mercenaries to basically periodically patrol your land with a higher level of frequency than what the normal, the normal UEE security forces would do. Basically, the equivalent of hiring your own personal security to keep watch, of your valuables. And I'm really just touching the surface here. I mean, another thing is this. It makes the point that you don't necessarily have to do the full end-to-end cycle in order to take advantage of this. You could, for example, buy land or discover land and then just flip the land after you've verified that it's got this, as opposed to you necessarily exploiting, mining, pulling up all of that material, which is a very particular type of gameplay that some people will love, but for other people, the discovery aspect or the security aspect, or on and on. If you have an interest in only one section of these areas, then you can still contribute to the overall equation. If you want to basically handle everything yourself, you can also do that.
Okay. So solely towards the Pioneer. And what I'm going to talk about is preparation. So first thing that you're going to do is you're going to need to do collect materials and add-ons from different stores. So you'll get materials from TDDs or refineries, and you'll be able to pick up some of the add-ons like Tony was talking about, remote sensors or extractors, solar panels, moisture extractors, geothermal pumps, landing pads, turrets, that kind of stuff. Now, what is very important to understand is, if any of you have ever done home projects, know what you're building, so that you don't do 5 trips to Hornbach to build something. So if you know what you're building, and then you know the resources that you'll save yourself multiple trips, or it will be one of those things where you'll need to have these resources brought to you. So what do you want from your outpost? What's your gameplay intent? Do you want to be a moisture farmer and
J'ai l'impression qu'ils ont un petit peu moins d'enthousiasme que les autres panels, les autres.
This beautiful beach, or do you want it to be like a revenue generator? So basically, you'll swoop in, you'll watch over it, you'll check in, make sure everything's running smoothly, move on to your next thing. So with this, we've got investment, not only from a resource and basically game money standpoint.
Ils ont un petit lag, c'est pas moi, c'est leur conférence.
Time to build, not as fast as Paul's videos. So the other thing is, depending on the size of it, that will increase the build time the higher you go. Now, once it's actually placed, you're going to want to upkeep it, depending on if you put something in Earth's atmosphere versus Mars's atmosphere versus Venus. Well, those are all different climates. And so the wear and tear and just kind of the usual stuff that we're doing with the ships, and as far as stuff breaking down, so on and so forth, this will be the same. So configuring. Now, the idea would be that you're working the architect station, you're choosing the exterior layout of it, and then from there, you'll move into the interior rooms. So some of the different interior options: habitation, armory, storage, med station, mining, refining, hydroponics. And so with this, depending on what you're doing, each one of them is going to require a different amount of power. And then that starts going into some of the add-ons. So if you're mining, or if you're doing something that's very, very power intensive, growing things, so on and so forth, then you're going to need to run extra power in there. And with the add-ons, just like with our ships, if you think of our ships as the base hull, and then you have your gimbals, you have your mounts, and then you're attaching weapons, you're attaching ordnance, you're attaching utility items.
Ça veut dire que la culture, elle s'en vient dans vraiment pas long, là, si on a déjà des modules hydroponiques.
And then you have these item ports that Chris always talks about that will feed into the ore extractors, and that's how we generate the power.
Okay. Tout s'en vient pas mal. Ils sont en train
so
de
here are just some of the internal shots. I think you guys have seen some of these already. I like the salad spinner, hydroponics.
Ça, c'est malade.
Different mining ideas, storage. So one of the important things is basically, if you're growing plants, or if you're basically dealing with any sort of bare form resources that will feed into our ecological system, then what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're actually storing these items and so that you're not just mining once and then basically having to shut down because you don't have any more space. Drug lab. So in case you want to do a little Breaking Bad. Then idea about research, and this would be maybe you're close to the sun or something like that, and you want to research some solar flares or those types of things. Med station. So the main thing for us has always been a sandbox and making sure that you have the freedom to focus on the gameplay that you find interesting. And so what we wanted to talk about was just some of the ecosystems that we feel these things help support and help build. You've got the haulers and traders that would be dealing with things that would come in, and if you're mining or if you're growing plants, well, these are going to take these to manufacturing or processing centers. Tony mentioned the security and the needing to actually protect your things, because I can guarantee you if you're making money, people are going to want to take it from you. Exploration, John mentioned this about going and finding these plots of land and everything like that. Then there's repair, obviously mining, farming, and the refining stuff. So that is our panel.
Je sais pas si c'est moi qui lag. Non, je pense que c'est...
Brian.
He won't be used to people finishing on time. Probably.
Oh yeah, we actually finished early. Do you want to?
That's fine.
Okay.
Are you kidding?
Okay.
Yeah, here I am. Awesome, thank you. We have time for a few questions, not the normal length, just because we need a little bit of prep time before Chris gives his large presentation.
The other thing is that I think some of us will be talking to Jared afterwards, and then the other thing is that some of us will also make sure that we're out by any extra questions that we need to answer.
Would that be the Intel Saber Ribbon?
Yes, it would be.
La présentation.
All right, so where's my mics in the audience for questions?
Va être live dans le fond là. Donc je vais arrêter ça pour là, puis je vais revenir dans pas tellement.